Peace and blessings, family. This is your brother, asarimhotep, with the Martin Delaney Center for Egyptology. And today, we are starting off on a Wednesday, aka Ujama, for our Kwanzaa dating standard here on this forum and this platform. And this is an open forum, so it's no specific topic for tonight, but whatever is on your mind. If you want to join the panel, and talk about whatever's on your mind or whatever question or anything that's been going on in the atmosphere since the last time we spoke, you will have that opportunity. And I will put the link in the chat. But all that and more when we return in just a moment. we are back, and I want to welcome each and every one of y'all. I'm in the midst of travels in the undisclosed location somewhere in the universe, uh, but just hoping that each and every one of you have been uh, having a blessed holiday, whatever it is that you celebrate. And we are in the midst of Kwanzaa, and here on the Mbongi. It is the Kwanzaa principles, 365. So, we have even gone the length of making our days named after the Kwanzaa principles. And today is Ujama. And so, as I stated before, this is an open forum. So whenever you have a question or a comment or anything that's on your mind pertaining to something relevant, you could either ask in the chat and I'll try to uh, reply to it, and let me just put the invite out there, to join show. There's the link in the chat. So the link for the chat should show up on the Facebook page, the asarimhotep Facebook page, as well as, of course, in the YouTube chat. If you are viewing from the X, formerly known as Twitter, website, you'll have to come and join us here on the YouTube if you want to ask your question or whatnot. And I'm gonna try to, because now with the StreamYard, you can link your StreamYard account in streaming to the Instagram. So I need to set that up to do the live streaming. So hopefully I can even do that, because my last account got hacked and destroyed. So I'm not sure if you have to have a certain amount of followers to use the streaming function. But we'll find out soon. And they only limit it to 1 hour of streaming. So I got to use it sparingly until they expand that number. But, in the meantime, I want to shout out each and every one of you who have made yourselves known in the chat. And before I do that, I want to pin the message. So if you are on the YouTube chat and you want to join the panel, the link is now pinned to the very top. And I see we have one person in the waiting room, so we'll get to you in just a moment. We just want to shout out a few of those who have made themselves known in the chat. So peace and blessings to Brother Obam, and Dasharab is in the place to be. And our good brother Teti Ursa Ma'at Ra Seneferu is in the building, as well as our good brother Robert Rand, New York, in the building. Peace and love to Sister Mika. She says, peace and love on my way to work. So I'm going to be in and out, but listening. And we appreciate your presence. And she reminds each and every one of you to big up and like the video and make sure that you subscribe. And so I also see here Mumbanza Kimit. He says Hotep Kimite, Hotep Matondo, and Geta Ashe Hotep. All of that. Indeed. And we have Orc promo. And I'm gonna come back and read your statements, and when I return. So I just want to give these shots outs first. And so Money B is in the building, as well as Mr. Trey Day 90, and long time no see, our good brother OG Gorilla, P Conman Silverback, if I'm saying that correctly. Conman, is it Conman or Conman? I don't know. You have to pronounce it for me. I know I'm messing that all up. And we have Brother Kuhani Madilifu in the back, waiting to be put on. But before I do that, And I know I said I was going to start at 9 on the East Coast, but I kind of hit the button early. So we just doing the show early. It is what it is. I'm ready. But tomorrow at 9 p.m., I'm going to be interviewing an elder by the name of Jabadi Powell out of Houston, Texas. I believe he's originally from Galveston, and he's one of the founding members of the Tasseti African Historical Society. And, just a wealth of knowledge on ancient Kemet, uh, certain personal relationships with some of our well known elders in the community that you may know of. And, it's just an honor. So, like, he's an individual who when I was, kind of first being reintroduced into this African knowledge, one of my stopping points was with the Tasseti African Historical Society. And, still in touch with all of the brothers actually. And a few have passed away, in terms of elders. And so this brother here is going to be with us on tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Eastern time, 7 p.m., excuse me, 8 p.m. Central time. And then on Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern time, so it's going to be a little bit early, but 11 a.m. Eastern time, I'm going to be interviewing a good brother, Kapuya Shiuma, I'm sorry. And uh, I forgot how many hours that is. I got to count it. Um, he's going to be live from Israel. So he's a brother out of the Congo, out of the Democratic Republic of Congo. He's of the uh, Baluba people. And however, he lives and works in Israel. And so, we're accommodating. So it'll be for the time zone. So it'll be 6 p.m. his time, the IDT time zone. So it'll be 11 a.m. East Coast time. So for those of you on the West Coast, it may be a little bit early for a Saturday if you want to sleep in. But, hopefully you guys can, make it to see it live. But we're going to be talking about, the Congo School of Egyptology and the relationship of Bantu languages and culture with the ancient Egyptian. So this is going to be a dope interview. And, we were supposed to interview earlier, but if you recall that I said that he lives in Israel. So if you know what's going on in Israel, it's kind of shaky on the ground there. So, hopefully, nothing will go wrong and him and his family will be safe. And, we're able to have this particular interview. And so that'll be this Saturday, the 30th of December. And so we'll be interviewing him at 11 a.m. Eastern time, Brother Kapuya Shiimu. And I don't know if I have any other announcements, but let me see. So let me first add you into the chat, Brother Kuhani. And let me get to one of these questions. I thought I saw a question. So, okay. So Dasharab says, how reliable is the TLA regarding roots? uh, that depends on what you mean by roots. And so I know, with this new version of the TLA, you'll see some entries with the square root symbol before, a pair. But how they determine what is a root or not, I'm not quite sure. Now, I have my own method, and it's not necessarily my own method per se, like I just made it up. However, when I determine a root, it is based not only on internal variations, of the root or the words, but also via comparative linguistics. And so whether they've done comparative linguistics, I doubt it. So they're probably making it based upon just different forms of the word. So if they could find, you know, different forms of the word and it looks and sounds reasonable, I think they put a root under it in this form. So I'm not I haven't read through the whole site to determine how they came to those particular conclusions. So, so in terms of their reliability, I'm still going through a lot of them just to see. And so I don't have an honest answer to that question. Um, and Obama asks, has the Greek word Sophia, wisdom, been borrowed from Negro Egyptian too? I believe so. And the the first person to my knowledge that the first person to my knowledge to make that argument was Dr. Theophilo Benga. And then later on, uh Mark Bernal in his Black Athena also made that argument. And we can tell by certain sound correspondences between uh, Egyptian and the Greek that this is the case. And so what Obenga argues is that it derives from the common word in Egyptian seba, which means, teacher. Matter of fact, do I have the TLA open right now? I think I'll do a TLA. Um, share my screen. And let's do that. And let's go thesaurus real quick. And so you can get all the variations. And so like this word, so this is the word here, seber, or seba, as we like to say, meaning wise and clever. It has, other meanings, for example, to teach, to tend, to learn, and with other, let me see, because this is getting to the starry forms, and there's, a homograph meaning door, and, sabau or sabawa, sabara, teacher or instructor in teaching, with all within that same scope. And you'll find this in Bantu languages in two forms. So the ones that you'll find mainly in Bantu will either be the SB form with just that, like you'll find some meanings like suba, seba, etc., or you'll find it with the S off in the B, and this is a R sound right here. You'll find variants with just that form. So like in both of them, one of the morphemes was lost in the data. But that idea of wise, like in wisdom. So this is wise, clever, and then if you just add a T behind it, you'll get kind of that same that meaning or whatnot. So so it's not too many entries here in the TLA, but that's what Obenga and Martin Bernal argue, because there's that word Sophia does not have an Indo-European etymology, and so they started looking into the ancient Egyptian, and that's what they came up with. So I'm not even sure if y'all was able to see all of that, but so, and I'm not sure if Mboli argues. I didn't I can't recall off the top of my head if he makes that argument either. But I'm sorry. It looks like you're about to say something.
Oh, I'm just waiting until you're done answering the question.
No problem. I'm gonna just do one more. Um, Even though he has two posts, it says, "I had a man from Nigeria tell me days ago that he didn't know he was black until he came to America. Another sign that the modern context of blackness not all African groups would identify with." Indeed, and I've shown many a times um that to be the case. Matter of fact, there was a. I'm gonna see if I can find it on my videos. So bear with me a second. I'm going to, because I know I uploaded it some time ago, and it was a sister who's a well-respected author who's from Nigeria, and that was one of the things that she was talking about, how uh, that this concept, she didn't know that she was black until she got here to the United States, and they told her she was black. And so, I tell folks this, that this concept of being of self-identifying as a black person is simply the result of interactions with European people who labeled us that. And it's hard for a lot of us to kind of fathom that, because especially those of us who are here in the United States, we were born into that socialization, into that system. Whereas, people on the continent, even though they have their issues with colonialism, this notion that they were a black people per se was not a an identifying factor among native folks. And I can't find the video, or maybe it's just a weird thumbnail that I'm not seeing at the moment. But I even have a old blog post that states that this Nigerian brother interviewed his grandmother, and she didn't know that she was black, or that she was African, or lived on a continent named Africa. And he wrote a blog post about it, and I copied and pasted and saved it to my Facebook some time ago. But let me see something here. Yeah, it looks like I'm not going to find it. But I'm gonna keep looking as we talk, and once I find it, then I will deal with it. But I know the person had an actual question. The next row says, given the distinctions you pointed out between the Remech and the Nubians in your last live, what would you guess is the Remech recognition of cultural similarity in their time? I don't know. I can't, because it appears that you're asking for me to get into the minds of the ancient Egyptians, and we can make arguments in hindsight in terms of their similarities and their differences. And whereas, um, well, there's a factor that we also have to keep in mind, is that there's no place called Nubian. There was no people called Nubians. It's different ethnic groups that lived in the South. And so, did the ancient Egyptians view them all as the same people, or did the ancient Egyptians uh, see them as individual groups? And were there some that they felt they had a close connection to, while others they was like, we are totally different from them. Those are the things that we have to ask and keep in mind when we're talking about these things. Because, like, for example, if I'm doing a linguistic analysis and I say that the ancient Egyptian language itself is closely related to one of the groups that is in modern Sudan. Now, the language implies a a shared culture to some extent, right? But oftentimes when we're doing comparative analysis, the words that are in language A that are cognate with the same words in language B, these words may not sound alike. And this is important because if the speakers of language A are in conversation with speakers in language B and the words sound different, they may not necessarily see, them as being related to them in any real significant sense outside of some surface, commonalities. However, us in this time when, we're able to write down the languages and we apply certain symbols for certain phonemes in the languages, and we're able to sit the languages and look at them side by side, we can be like, this language is, corresponds heavily with this language over here, even though them two may not see each other as particularly close. And a good example of that is like the Igbo and the Yoruba. And so, they may have shared an ancestor 1,000, 500 years ago, but they see themselves as totally different people, totally different nations, right? And there's some significant differences in terms of how you pronounce certain words in Igbo versus Yoruba, but they're the same people. They're cousins. They're like first cousins, right? In from that sense. But and remember that this is an open forum, so the link is in the chat and it's plugged at the top for those who are on YouTube. But go ahead, brother Kuhani.
Hey, sir, it's always an honor that I'm on the show. It's always good to know I'm with a fellow brother. Um, Now I'd like to ask this question. With your book, Race and Identity in Ancient Egypt, would you
Hmm.
classify that as a beginner's work? Because I'm trying to get back into learning about African, history again, specifically Egypt. So is that first value more of a beginner's, or is it like advanced, like, you know,
I would classify it as intermediate to advanced. There's certain
okay,
aspects of it that are advanced, and then there are other aspects of it that are intermediate. So, but I anticipate people who are very much beginners, and that's why I took the time out in chapter uh, 2 to, what was it, chapter 1? Yeah, it's chapter 1. So, you have the introduction, and then chapter 1 goes into explaining from the beginning the essential quest of the book, um, how the book came to be, and then also there's a section on research methods and kind of like an intro into historical comparative linguistics so that you can see that. So I provide a way that you can follow the text. And although you may not start off being able to Like if you was just to jump around and just do this, you know, unless you're kind of familiar with certain practices, you may get confused at certain junctures. However, you know, that's the reason why I have chapter 1 there, which includes uh, several sections on essentially how to read the book, how to follow my analysis, and source material for, you know, learning further issues, for example, dealing with historical comparative linguistics and why this is important to the research project uh, regarding, you know, the race and identity question. So um so yeah, so I would say it's a intermediate to advanced text. So there's certain aspects and then there's going to be advanced, but you know, I try to help the reader along. And so that's why it's so thick, because I'm
Right.
including information there that I know the beginner would not know just off the top of their head. So you'll find sections in there that guide you through the process of how to answer the question, with examples and source materials and regarding paradigms and arguments, you know, in the field. And then you'll be able to go and you know, breeze through the rest of the book.
Okay. I have another question.
All righty.
So, what is your research methodology as a linguist? Are you Afro-centered? Are you more academic consensus? What is your theoretical approach with your works?
Well, I would say two fundamental paradigms. So in terms of the larger enterprise, I'm an Africologist, right? And this is someone who does the study of African phenomena through the paradigm of Afrocentricity, right?
Okay.
And but I'm also a scientist. So I'm an Africologist that has a number of tools in my toolbox. And so if certain questions, for example, require a linguistic analysis, I'll use linguistic tools and the tools and methods of the field. But when I'm analyzing, for example, when I'm going into the linguistic field of semiotics and semantics, I have to put on my Africologist hat, because if I'm discussing African phenomena, I'm going to have to be grounded in the cultures for which I am um, analyzing. And so I can't approach, like if I'm studying the wisdom tradition, the spiritual traditions of an African people, I can't come from the paradigm of Islam or Christianity, for example, or
Preach,
Zoroastrianism, or any of those things that are
preach.
outside of the purview, you know, of the people who I'm analyzing. And so I'm able to group certain African people together based on, you know, years and years of study, and, you know, using a combination of things, right? So um so the overarching framework is Afrocentricity,
Okay.
but it just depends on what it is that I'm studying in application to the study of African people. Because I may then now need to rely on some atmospheric data, right? That
Mm,
doesn't, where Afrocentricity itself doesn't lend it uh itself to that particular thing, because we're studying, for example, the rates and the decay of certain isotopes in the soil, right? That may provide us some clues as to where, you know, a particular object in the course of trade originated, right? And like if we're trying to locate punt.
Right.
And so like one of the analysis in which they did was they were studying like the certain chemical characteristics and certain chemical signatures of the bones of the baboons that were brought in from Punt. And by analyzing the soil samples in Punt with those, because you know they have certain nutrients and a certain amount of, you know, whatever, you know, molecules or whatnot in that particular area, which we can kind of pinpoint where at least these items were found and then brought over to ancient Egypt, right? Like so that is not so much an Afrocentric analysis, because we're looking at molecules and chemicals and rates of decay and all this other kind of stuff, but it's used for the better articulation of African history. And so this is where it comes in. So now you can add this bit of data in conjunction with a string of data and tell a more compelling story in terms of the evolution and the events of African people throughout time and history.
I have another question for you. Is that fine?
I'm sorry?
I have another question for you. Is that fine?
Yes, that's fine. And sorry, and peace and blessings to brother Conan Lee. Yes, that was her name. Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. And let me see if I see you in the 42. I see you in the background. I'm gonna bring you in just a moment, but let me, because I even recently reposted it, but so now I gotta go into my stash of posts on Facebook and see what's the damn deal. Okay, no, that's me arguing with some folks, because you know that's what we do on Facebook, argue all day. Here we go. So let me click that and let me share. Let me add our good brother and let me share my screen real quick. Right, so
race is not one of them, because I guess most people in Nigeria are Black. In many West African countries, we don't have race as an identifying part of us. So when I went to the US, all I had thought of myself was a Catholic and Igbo, and Nigerian, of course. But then in the US, people would just say things to me about being Black, and I would think, I don't even know what that means. But most of all, it was that I started to learn that Black wasn't a value-free idea. That to be called Black was that people made assumptions about you. There was a professor who was surprised that I wrote the best essay in class. And I realized that he was surprised because he didn't expect a Black person to write the best essay. And so for me, it was a learning process. Of course, now I very much identify as Black. And I've also come to learn about African American history and to deeply admire that history is a history of African Americans who are very resilient, who have systematically and consistently been undermined by the American state, and who continue to thrive. And I think that African American history is under-celebrated. Because in Nigeria, I didn't think of myself as Black, because nobody thinks of themselves as Black in Nigeria. We have many problems, but race is not one of them, because I guess most people in Nigeria are Black. In many West African countries.
So I hope y'all were able to hear that. Were y'all able to hear on the panel
I could
I
clearly?
hear.
wasn't.
Yeah,
I'm
it
sorry.
came in. No, it came in for me.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure. So I don't have my big speakers. I got I'm listening through uh, the little speakers on because I had this little mini PC that's y'all can't really see right here. So it has some built-in speakers, but it's nothing that I can really bump loud. So I'm just making sure that it was of a good volume that y'all can hear. But as you heard her say, she said that she didn't notice she was black until uh, she came here to the United States. And so when we're trying to apply this racial connotation on African people as an indigenous concept, not saying that once they've encountered Europeans, that many like we have done over here in the United States have not accepted that labeling. But what I have yet to find is indigenous African people, like that was their name, that's what they named themselves. And just as she said, like it would make no sense for the Igbos to call themselves blacks amongst people who share the same color as them in such a wide spans. But peace and blessings, 42. You have a question or comment?
Yeah, I have one question and kind of a big comment that I'm going to try to shorten. First, thanks for having me. How's everybody? Um,
Peace.
I'm still like I'll probably be in school while doing homeschool stuff until March, and after that, I'll be able to get back on reading. I'll be able to check out your book, and I see a way where, even though I don't speak hardly any French, a little
Mm-hmm.
bit, I there's a way to translate Mboli's work digitally. And that's in relation to the comment that I wanted to make first, because you remember last time I was in your channel, you
Mm-hmm.
were responding to, I think his name was Abasi, and he was speaking about Mboli's work, and I thought that's what it was, but I, I asked you, and you verified it and went into more detail. Um, but to shorten everything up a little bit, um, it motivated me to look into the biological rationale for his language families, because
Mm-hmm.
I know that's how people are going to react to it. And in a sense, like I think it's both a valid reaction and an understandable layman's reaction, because it'll be like, wait a second, Mende is related to like people in Iraq, but there's a lack of a temporal like step back and think, in the sense that language is much older than the 300-year S&P homogeneous populations. And even then, it's not terribly uncommon to find someone far away who's like got a little old ancestry from a long contact. You see Khoisan people who have like Eurasian from, because they were in the sticks and say had contact with people migrating who would eventually become Eurasians. Um, and then they became isolate. So you do see some things like that. So I wanted to look into that, and I'm playing a little hooky from school to really go review sources, because I had some leads in my head when I was thinking about how people would react to that. So that's something I'm working on. That'll be my side project that I'll probably put out on my channel, which will explore the biological relations with some of these old populations that were like, when you look at the split from D and E, these were some of the same people like 50,000 years ago. And but that's kind of leads to the question I had was, I remember you also have a quote that you cited in from Blinn about how he was remarking that, hold on a second, like Indo-European is we kind of say it's 7,000 years old, but Bantu is 4,000 years old, and he's like, I just don't see how that's possible given the diversity. And I just wanted to see what you thought about that sort of line of thinking, that what's happened where we're actually where Indo-European as in like mainstream linguistics is considered an older language family than Bantu is a theoretical family. And what do you think's really happening? Because I have a feeling if Blinn seems to, if I'm pronouncing his name right, I think it's Robert Blinn, right? But if he thinks it's wild, I assume you probably think it's like an open mistake that nobody's addressing.
Well, it's going to be kind of hard to pinpoint like a time frame. You can't date languages. And this is something that, I wish linguists would really stop doing, because it gives the implication that, because a language is something that only lives in the minds and the breaths of human populations. Unless there is writing, and of course, writing is always going to come after the language has already been established. And rarely, if ever, if you would have a written language of a proto language, unlike Latin. Latin is like maybe the only one that we have a actual written of a proto language, and we've been able to track the daughter languages, since that time. But that's not the case for languages around the world. So, like, there's a text that I would recommend. Let me see if, because it's like the wheel. Because I have this as a physical book too. Hold on just 1 second. Okay, so let me share my screen, and we'll just do the entire screen this time. Let's do, well, we need to go back up. There we go. Let's get that out of the way. And so this text here, can y'all see that well?
Yeah, it's pumping. It's up.
The Indo-European Controversy, Facts and Fallacies in Historical Linguistics. Doctors Aisha Perlets-Veig and Martin W. Lewis. And so this is a woman, this lady here. And so they're going over all of the, the issues, and, especially with certain folks trying to use, Bayesian analysis for determining the path of Indo-European and the like. And so Anatolia versus the steeps, et cetera, et cetera. So in a nutshell, what these, and this came out in 2015, what these authors are arguing in terms of, specifically to your question, in terms of dating, that they don't know exactly when Proto-Indo-European emerged. However, based upon the presence in essentially all of the branches of Indo-European languages for the word for wheel, they have at least a good date for when Proto-Indo-European was at least established, because we have archaeological finds for the wheel, and they can date those. So if you have the presence of the wheel at a particular time, and then you have in all the Indo-European branches the same word for wheel, of course, the pronunciation has diverged over time in these different branches. You can at least say in Proto-Indo-European at this time, they at least had the wheel, because we find it in all of the different branches. So it was an inherited term that we can establish based on sound laws for the presence of the wheel. So Indo-European dates to at least the presence of, from the origins of the wheel. But it's not to say that Proto-Indo-European and the development of the wheel emerged at exactly the same time. We would expect that the Proto-Indo-European was older, but how much older, we cannot say. And then when it comes to Bantu, keep in mind that at least from an Mboli standpoint and an asarimhotep standpoint and a Muba being a Bilolo standpoint, what we're calling Bantu is essentially the structure of the proto language for Negro Egyptian itself. And so what we're calling modern Bantu is a specific branch of Bantu, if that makes any sense. Like Bantu, like Proto-Bantu or pre-Proto-Bantu, if you want to use that, is the basis for, let me see, for example, because I need to find, well, I can go, because I think I have it open. So this is, from my latest book, the Race and Identity in Ancient Egypt, Volume 1. Excuse me, yeah. So, if you have Umoja Volume 2, this same map is in here. So this is my rendering of what Mboli calls the Bere branch. So there's the Beher branch, B-E-E-R, and then the Bere branch of Negro Egyptian, B-E-R-E. So this is just my map for the B-E-R-E, the Bere branch. So what based upon my analysis, because I'm in the chapter here discussing Sumerian, that there's a pre-Proto-Bantu, and it gives birth to what I call Chi-Bantu, or the modern Bantu languages. But this same pre-Proto-Bantu gives birth to what we call Para-Bantu Bere. It's still Bantu in nature, but there was a lot of loss of certain grammatical functions and a lot of things that were fossilized in the lexemes. And so this is where you get your Middle Egyptian, your Sumerian, your Bambara, your Hassa, your Zande languages. So the modern Bantu and for example, Middle Egyptian and Sumerian, they all share the same proto language, which I call pre-Proto-Bantu. And so and I'm saying this to say that my argument, of course, is going to be different from what you'll probably find in modern, or I should say, in certain mainstream linguistic analyses. And even then, you're going to find diverging opinions. And so the person who I think you was trying to recall is Dr. Roger Blinch. And
Yeah,
Roger
yeah,
Blinch is the one who argues that Bantu is not even a language family.
yep. Could you check that image I sent in the private chat, because it kind of demonstrates biologically what you just put up, and it's done with like bootstrap measurements, which is it's the same type of identity by descent that they use with animals, like to show. Actually, right, I think the best example is when it failed to show that dogs were deeply ancestral to wolves and they're more of a sibling species. But like the Bantu languages within Homo sapiens, like the what would become modern Bantu speakers, are closer to the foundation of Homo sapiens, kind of in the same way like what you just put up with Proto-Bantu, giving way to languages that aren't Bantu. Like, like I because doesn't that Proto-Bantu lead to like the Cushitic languages too?
Yes, and that's,
And I know how loaded that is, but
yeah, so like that's just the thing. Like it's you really have to start, like we're at a stage where we have to start from scratch, because it's the arguments are so divergent, and a lot of folks don't realize how divergent these arguments actually are. And because some people don't believe that, for example, if I was like the latest book that came out on Afroasiatic, one author argues that Egyptian and Semitic are not genetically related. Another author at the end of the book argues that Hassa is not part of Afroasiatic. Another author in the same text argues that Cushitic is not a family, or that Oromo is not Afroasiatic. So if you have these this many opinions, so if for example, if Chadic is not an Afroasiatic family, but Oromo is not an Afroasiatic family, and we don't even know if Cushitic really is a family. And if you're saying that Egyptian and Semitic are not genetically related, then only one of them could even be Afroasiatic. And so, for too long, we have been dependent upon these researchers, and they haven't been able to provide the deep scientific analysis necessary to link all of these dang languages. And so what the African school is forced to do is simply start from scratch. And that's what a lot of people just don't want to do. Because language and linguistics is very time consuming. And whether AI will be able to help a great deal in the future, we don't know. But as far as this uh, image here, I'm going to have to, study that and see what is, with that. And where does that map from?
It's that's the source that it's from is like you could follow it through the link, like
Mhm.
ResearchGate. It's one of the figures in it. It's it what I'm the video I'm doing, the hooky project, where I'm
Mhm.
taking some time off from things that I'm studying. It's not going to be that technical. It's just basically, here's something to think about, because I don't think a lot of people get enough credit because of just sort of like layman's reactions, and I'm talking like from you to Wanger, like Campbell Dunn. Like I read through Campbell Dunn's encyclopedia, and I swear
Mm.
if you were to just like not tell people what languages they were and just have them look at the comparisons, I bet people would think that Sumerian was just any old Bantu language. And so it's a kind of an ode to them, to Mboli, because it took them like 10 years.
Yeah.
And to me, I agree, it's something more constructive to build on, because when you run into like a kaleidoscope of disagreement, like you were just saying, all the people, like the people that are saying Oromo is an Afro-Asiatic, it almost starts to sound like people debating who their favorite MC is. And it just
Mhm.
ends up being like a opinion, and I'll make the science fit afterwards. And what all really I'm trying to put forth, uh, and this will probably be up maybe 2 or 3 weeks or so at the latest, is
Mhm.
that there is evidence that people who are related split from each other in ancient times, kind of like with the map you had up earlier. And that's
Mhm.
just following the lineages by clad, because you would figure at the very least you can be non-related to someone that you share a language with, but there should be a point in time where at least the lineages cross paths in some way. And that I thought was kind of obvious, and in a way there's kind of some hypocrisy to it, because I remember when, like, take Ngozi, who he called this whole line of thinking pseudo, but at the same time, like 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, he was saying that haplogroup E came out of Green Arabia. Now he's changed his mind on that. Now I'm thinking it's Libya, but like if it's Libya and it splits off, it goes, the Mende carriers of E, and the old West Asian carriers of it, and even like the ancestors to the younger uh, West Asian groups. They're all, and like that's why I put up that thing with bootstraps. There's sort of a siphon to an ancestry that's more like Central African than I think people normally consider, because it's not like these groups split apart to the point where the things that are really old within them, because you also see this with STRs, like and language is old, like language is something that Homo sapiens have been doing for quite a while. it it's in these populations, like DE is, that's a good bulk of Japan and a great bulk of Africa. That's only like estimate 80,000 years old to some extent. Like these populations were the same people, and when they split, it wasn't always immediate. So a deeper ancestry than, like I said, that you're going to see on something like 23andMe, which is the last 300 years,
Mhm.
involves who they learn to speak from. So, and then combining that with, because I read through that whole thing with that GK Campbell Dunn put out, and yeah, I
There's the Sumerian, yeah,
yeah, that dictionary,
uh-huh.
and there were times when like the Sumerian entry, it, like even Wanger one. Well, let me finish my sentence. There were times when it looked more like Bantu than some of the Bantu languages, just doing a flat comparison. But even like going back to Willibald Wanger, and I think it's pronounced Wanger instead of Wagner. But either way,
Mhm.
he was calling Sumerian the Sanskrit of Bantu. And I'm like, imagine saying that 100 years ago, like that in the 1930s. Imagine the pushback he had. Uh, so, and I've like, that's something I was looking to see where I could find that, and I was like, I found one for like 150 bucks. I'm not trying to drop 150 bucks on that, but like it can go on the to do list later on, but there's some others in front. Like I think I'd rather get Mboli's work and really take my time with that in the next year.
Indeed. Um, Yeah, I mean, that's a lot to unpack, but let me first answer this question from Josiah X. I'm not sure. I don't think I've been to the Great Blacks and Wax Museum, but I believe I was at Everyone's Place. So the last time I was in Baltimore was a couple years. No, it was last year, and in the summer. And one of the places I went to was that well-known bookstore. And I'm wondering if that's Everyone's Place that you're talking about. Is over there near Drew Hill. So let me know if that's if that sounds familiar. But I don't believe I've been to the Great Blacks and Wax Museum, but I believe I was at Everyone's Place. If that is the same space. Otherwise, it's a different bookstore. I forgot what the name was, unfortunately, but it's a 2-story bookstore and shopping. It got clothing, incense, all that other good stuff. But most of the books are on the second floor. And so if you, I'm pretty sure you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. So let me know if I'm in the ballpark. But to your question, like I was just, if I share my screen again, let me do that and share the screen, right? And so again, this is from my latest text, but there's something in here because this is just preliminary work, and I intend to do like a full scale analysis using the comparative method for establishing the relationship between Sumerian and Bantu languages, right? And I'm gonna use Congo, Chiluba, isiZulu, and Ugandan language, right? And so, but what I wanted to show here was that, I stated the affinities between Sumerian and Bantu have been known, or at least hypothesized, since the early 20th century, as the following excerpt confirms. So this is Harry Johnson or Johnston in his A Comparative Study of Bantu and Semi-Bantu Languages, Volume 2. So this was in 1922, so essentially 100 years ago that he's making this statement. So, of course, he's a white person of his day, so he thinks that it was some benevolent whites who came into Africa and black people started speaking their languages. But he makes this important statement here. He says, but the main principles of Bantu syntax, and let me know if you can see very well. And I know it's on the screen,
It's clear.
Okay.
I'm getting it.
All right. So, but the main principles of the Bantu syntax and the instinct for dividing nouns into classes based on a quite different distinction from that of sex may have originated in the mind of some white or quasi-white people of the Mediterranean basin, whose speech and cultus preceded in North Africa, and that of the Libyan, Berber, Egyptian, Hamite, Ethiopian. So all these are white folks to him, right? So such a race of Neolithic, pre-Libyan colonialists or colonists of North Africa may have been akin to the Pelasgian Aegeans of Crete and of prehistoric Greece and Sicily, or it may have come from prehistoric Egypt or from Spain, though Basque has not the slightest affinity with the class language or with the other speech forms of Africa. The only language families outside of Africa which offer the slightest affinity in any way with Bantu tongues are the Sumerian and Dravidian groups, right? The interrupted range of the Dravidian languages at the present day extends north westward in the Baluchistan, or into Baluchistan, if I'm saying it, or I'm assuming it's Chi, Baluchistan. It is a plausible theory that the ancestral type of Dravidian language invaded India from the direction of the Persian Gulf. In very ancient times, Proto-Dravidian speech may have spread into Syria, Egypt, and the Mediterranean coast. But the resemblances between the Dravidian and Bantu language structures are so very faint that it is a waste of space discussing them here. So now he's going to go into some people who before him have even noticed the affinities between Sumerian and Bantu. So he says the late Sir Richard Burton had a theory that the Sumerian speech of Mesopotamia exhibited an affinity with Bantu. The Reverend W.A. Crabtree has been writing on this subject in the 1919 volume of the African Society's Journal. All we have right now, all we have any right to surmise is that Bantu and semi-Bantu languages were created by the impact on the Negroes of the Central Sudan of a Mediterranean race speaking a language which preceded the advance of the Aryan, Hamitic, or Semitic tongues. Such early invaders of tropical Africa from the direction of the north may have been the ancestors of the Ful or the Fulani people of Senegambia and northern Nigeria. So, of course, this is, he's a racist of his time. I ain't gonna say he's necessarily a racist, but I'll say he's a racist because their only explanation of the relationship between Sumerian is that it was some white folks who came out of the Middle East and the North Africa and then landed in tropical Africa. And essentially these unknown Negroes in Central Africa adopted the language of the more superior, whites or Hamites. But, that's neither here nor there. The point is that as early as 100+ years ago, and so Wagner's text isn't on here either that you can include, right? They're already showing, and I show some, I cite some other ones in some other contexts in terms of the relationship between Sumerian and in Bantu, right? And so I go through my explanation, then I just start going into my own comparative analysis. But that's the fundamental issue that we have. And it says my camera was unplugged with the. Okay, there we go. That's the fundamental issue that we have here is, them trying to explain away these relationships. And so, this is why, like in the modern time, we're going to have to do a real good, serious analysis when it comes to Sumerian. So I believe I have enough information that I could start doing, that particular work. Are you there?
Yeah, I was listening and looking some things up. I was also curious because I know I think that one source, the one who was talking about the semi-white people too, was that Robert something? I always want to make somebody a Robert. But he also mentioned that Basque wasn't related in any way to an African language, but I hear a lot of people that put forth theories about that, but not as much as Sumerian. Like I think there was this dude who was saying that it's related to Dogon, and that it's kind of related to like Berber languages, but you're also going to see a relation to Bantu, and I don't know if there's been much work on that. I thought there was something, but so far the only thing I know is this dude. I think he goes by Martin Martine, but that's it. I've always been curious about uh, Basque because it's like it's always the languages that are right next to Africa that are language isolates. Uh, it, and I think that's just related to using the mass comparison method. So it's gonna produce languages that aren't really genetically related. But that's it. You answered. I think you responded to that well because I didn't know of any of those sources at all. Like I was basically going by Wanger, Hermstein, and Dunn, and so it's more people than I suspected.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I wasn't even checking, but until I started reading all the stuff, and I'm like, where there's smoke, there's fire. The problem with Campbell Dunn is that he uses the Greenberg method, and so it can that method can only really kind of confirm a suspicion, but it can't establish a relationship. So that's why you have to go through the comparative form. And then that's when you're going to be able to shut people up. Because, if Sumerian was truly an isolate, it would be impossible, for example, for me to let me do something real quick. Oh no, I need to go here. Do that. Right. So it's like people don't understand like how impossible this is to, and this is my text. If Sumerian was truly an isolate, it would be impossible to find regular correspondences between basic vocabulary, for example, between a reconstruction in terms of Proto-Bantu and then Sumerian itself and the Collagen language, which is supposed to be a Nilo-Saharan language. Right? So like if we just take this first 3 rows here, remember 3s establish the sound meaning correspondences. And so when you have here Sad, incise, cut, tattoo, Sumerian, Sar, right, Collagen, Ser, right, and authors. Sada, field, Sar, garden, plot, Ser, neat, kitchen garden, small garden near home, Sar, hurry, Sar, run, hasten, Sar, hurry, haste, Ser, serene, run about, bustle about. Like this idea, remember that writing comes from the notion of cutting and scraping. That's why these coincide in the idea of a field and a garden in garden kitchen plot, and to hurry, to run, to hasten. It's impossible for these 3 languages because we're doing 2 actual experiments here. We're doing a live comparison between Sumerian and Collagen. But since this is a reconstruction, we're testing the reconstructions against 2 other languages that were not involved in the reconstruction process to test the validity of the reconstructions. And so this would be part of the internal reconstruction for the family, whatever family this is. So we're using Proto-Bantu here to establish that there's a family relationship between Bantu, Sumerian, and Collagen. And so all three of these languages would share the same proto-language. And notice even how you reconstruct the vowels. All three of these have A in the first vowel position, and so does the Sumerian. But in the Collagen, the A has become I for the most part, or E if you want to, with the exception of this one here, it still maintains the A. Like these forms here, like D, NG, consonant sequence, pot, do, clay pot, ter, pot, ter, dry lump of clay or cow dung, dingum, cower, to be paralyzed, dig, be paralyzed, ter, weak, infirm. And then you have this fuller form, tekin, talk in a hurry and run away due to fear. Dong, speak, to teach. Doog, speak, talk, say, order. Twek, voice. And so anybody with knowledge of languages know that K can become T and T becomes R intervocally. Right. And so, it's later borne out in other forms as well, as we see later on in the comparisons. But this is why we do these comparisons, because once you start doing historical comparative linguistics and you start matching, grapheme for grapheme, phoneme for phoneme, then it's a whole totally different argument, because nobody can say that this stuff is at random. And so I talked to Garfield earlier today. Oh, actually, he messaged me earlier today. So he let me know that there's going to be a guy who's a Sumerologist who's going to be reviewing my text. So, it'll be interesting. And he's going to try to set up a conversation between him and I after he's finished reading the text.
That'll be fun. See, that's why I gotta hurry up and finish what I'm doing, because that is a lot of work. I would have checked it out like that. It was gonna be a Christmas present, but I got Baldur's Gate 3, so I'm taking a vacation in March once I finish all this, and that's when I'm gonna really get back to reading. Hopefully on a beach, but most likely I'll be in Arizona next to a cactus. But I got family down there, so looking forward to it. I do have to shoot out, so I'm gonna catch the rest with Josh. This is like my Sunday with my work schedule, so I gotta do a little part-time in between courses and stuff. So thanks. And yeah, I'm looking forward to that conversation with the Sumerologist, because I didn't know you had that much work in the book on that relationship. So
yeah, this is just the preliminary. So like, when you start doing work like what I just showed you, this gives you the impetus to be able to go in and look deeper into the language, because what I've done, this doesn't necessarily establish the genetic relationship, because you have to go through a series of morphological and syntactical analyses, but nothing begins until you're able to establish the sound meaning correspondences and establish sound laws between the basic vocabulary. And that's what this this section, so this is an appendix to the text, does. And so, and I put this in here because, you know, the Sumerian language was very vital and important in establishing the meaning of the word Kemet. And so, you know, anticipating you know, people saying that you can't compare Sumerian and Egyptian, you know, and Bantu. I'm like, how? You know, I've already done all this work that's in Appendix B. This tells me that I can do that. That's why I chose Sumerian, because Sumerian is a contemporary language to ancient Egyptian.
Yeah, I remember Netter Neb was saying that, and I'm like, but Sumerian, like Iraq is closer to Africa than Africa is to itself. Like, if you're just going by location, you know, like if you can include the Atlas Mountains in South Africa, then you can include, you can do it. You know, the results will be the results, but you can't just say you can't do it because it's like some obscure tribe in Greenland. You know, it's right next to Africa.
Exactly. And just a reminder to everyone who is just joining the conversation, this is an open forum. And if you want to join the panel, hit the link. It is pinned to the top on YouTube. And I'm not sure how it's showing up on Facebook, but it's on the asarimhotep Facebook page as well. And our good brother Josh has just joined the panel. So peace and blessings to you.
How's it going, man?
It's going well. It's going well.
What up,
Welcome to
42?
the
What's up, Josh? And I'm also going to say goodbye, and I'll be looking forward to catching the rest while I'm grinding tomorrow. Thanks.
No problem. Indeed. Peace and blessings. What's on your mind?
What up, brother? I have a few questions, but this is all very interesting to me. But I was on social media the other day, and I was talking to this guy who says he's Nubian, and he has this post saying like I just want to get your perspective on this, bro. He says only quote unquote Nubians can take credit for that civilization. What is he? So he's saying Nilotic people aren't Nubian and all this kind of stuff. What is your perspective on it? Because I thought Nubian was like a generic term to describe many people, but I don't know.
Yeah, he would have to be more specific, because again, there's a true Nuba people that live in the northern Sudan in the Nuba Mountains. Who this is where we get the modern name of Nubia from, you know, named after the Nuba people. But in ancient times, not saying that the Nuba people didn't exist, but there was no territory called Nubia.
Wow.
And so, you know, that area, which in modern times we are calling Nubia, was the homeland to various different African ethnic groups and language groups. So he would, whoever the person who made that post, he would have to narrow down and identify a specific group. And then we would have to be able to pinpoint or do a comparison between their language and the ancient Egyptian language or languages throughout the time periods to see if, in fact, you know, there's a direct connection between his group and the ancient Egyptian group in languages, to see if they, you know, if like they're speaking a modern variant of the ancient Egyptian language.
Wow. Okay.
Now, for example, let me see if I can find it real quick. Because I have the Bamboo. Okay, well, this is, but I have another one of his books though. What would it be entitled? Be nope. Is it? Here we go. Alrighty. So let me just share my screen here. So this text here, let me hide that. Okay, so this author here, Dr. Kip Kuich Arap Sambu, is of the Collagen people that live in modern day Kenya. Now, the Collagen people, this is how you spell it. The Collagen people, they would be considered Nilots. But in their oral tradition, they argue that they originally came out of ancient Kemet. And this has been a staple in their tradition for the longest. So when Europeans first encountered the collagen, before anyone became a Christian, before anyone became Muslim, and they was just their own indigenous, when they were recording the history of these people, that's what they were saying. And so Dr. Sambu, when he got his PhD in Egyptology, this is his PhD dissertation: Isis and Isis, Eastern Africa's collagen people and their pharaonic origin legend, a comparative study. And so what he did is, again, this is his actual thesis. And what he did was he broke it up into 2 books. And so the first one is dealing with is Isis. And then the second one is the Missouri legend explored, a linguistic inquiry into the collagen people's oral tradition of ancient Egyptian origin.
Wow, cool.
I'm sorry?
I was just saying this. Thanks for the information. This is interesting, man.
All right. So and this is the author here, right? So he's going to go through, I think his linguistic analysis, it's a lot to be desired, but there's enough there for anyone who's trained to go back behind him and do the serious work. Right. But so I'm bringing, him up because of the comment that you made in terms of like the Nilots are not
right,
part of that group that emerged and created ancient Kemet. Well, that, I don't know if the person who made the comment was like a professional historian or anything to that nature, but they're going to have to do what he has done.
That's a good point. I didn't think of it like that.
Exactly. Now keep in mind, however, like if you was to, I think it's the Shabaka stone. If you read the Shabaka stone, the author of the Shabaka stone was a retelling of a particular story that was originally written on papyrus, but the papyrus was decaying and it was being eaten by worms and all this. And so the then Pharaoh Taharka or whatnot commissioned that the story be put on stone. So of course the worms couldn't eat it. And so this is where we get the Shabaka stone. I'm sorry, it's Shabaka. That's why it's called the Shabaka stone. So not Taharka, but Shabaka, right? So in the text, at the beginning of the text, it states something to the nature of that this is the writings of our ancestors. Now, keep in mind, this is in the 25th dynasty. So for him to say that this is a work of the ancestors, of our ancestors, he's saying that this is a story from our people from an earlier time.
Right.
So it would, and there's other information that would lend credence to the notion that basically the 25th Kushite dynasty was just another Egyptian dynasty, but from like one of the first cousins of the original group, if that makes sense.
Okay.
You
Not
know,
to interrupt you, have you heard of Stuart Tyson Smith?
yes, I have.
Have you? What do you think about his work? And
I have a text. I remember reading a text of his a long time ago before I really actually saw him. I guess my first time actually seeing him, and I didn't realize who he was until like later, was because Dr. Shamarka Keita invited me to a lecture that he was doing online. And
okay,
I
right.
was able to see him. So he gave me the link and to listen to him. So but it's been a while since I've read his actual text to remember which text it was that I was actually reading. But it seems like he has, you know, he's better than most, but he doesn't have the necessary training to go all the way, in my personal opinion.
No, I understand. I understand where you're coming from, brother. Yeah.
You know, he's just not gonna he's just not gonna go there. And but you know, he's somebody that I've been looking to look more deeply into than I have. But I forgot because I know I have.
All right. While you're looking for that, I'm at the store. I'm gonna check out real quick, bro.
All right, no problem. I'm trying to see. This is that's Toby Wilkinson. Who is this? Stewart. Catherine Paqua, Dr. Karen Excel. I need to get her on the show as well. See, I may have yeah, I don't think I have any ebooks by him. I have the physical books, and I'm not nowhere near my crib that I can just go pull up the book or pull out the book. But yeah, I've heard a lot of people mentioning him recently.
I brought him up because he was during one of his lectures. He's basically saying the same stuff about it's wrong to call the 25th dynasty, something other than basically some around this type of stuff you're saying. So I was wondering if you but yeah.
Yeah, it's been a minute. I need to check out his stuff. I've just been in other spaces, and so I haven't been able to keep up with a lot of the commentary lately. I know the other channels, they're still going back and forth on the Kemet and black folks.
Oh yeah.
And blackness, and yeah, I can only take so much.
Right.
of the shenanigans, but yeah. And again, everyone, if you want to join the conversation, the link to join the conversation is pinned to the top on YouTube, and it is shared on the asarimhotep page on Facebook. But and thanks, Sister Mika, for the shout outs and the links for the folks in the chat. And I'll just play that advertisement for a second. We'll be right back.
Yeah. Tokyo wanna those that. What's up? Feeling like I dropped the draw for and caught Uno. Came to kick the door where the game in judo. Pin game low, that's why they give me kudos. Inspired by the 3-0. 595, check it for pack light. Hit the turnpike, slide to a baseline. Gotta sound like I just hit the 8-5. Oh, I'm so ready, by enemies necessary. We gon' be legendary, hold up. About to grow the payrolls. If you see the vision and you're with it, you should say so. Cause we about building, elevating the millions.
That is right. Make sure that you get your copy. And, Sister Mika has put the link in the chat. And so I recently got, maybe I can show my screen there, my copy from Amazon. It's the light too bright. Brother Jonathan Owens, Black Like Osiris text. And so I'll be doing a review of it. So, look for that in 2024.
That's what's up.
So yeah, so just letting you know I got it. And so I've had an opportunity to kind of skim through certain parts. And so I'll reserve my commentary. I want to go through each chapter and take my notes and then do a good summary of it. But this is the text. And so, he's at least putting his arguments on paper, and that's what we require. But this is, for those who haven't seen what my book looks like. This is, and I'm sorry for this bright light here, but this is the text, Race and Identity in Ancient Egypt, Volume 1. And if we look at the size difference, you can see. So I'm expected more in terms of text, but I'll judge it on its own merits. And so look for that sometime in 2024. And we got our brother Zoo221 in the building. Peace and blessings to you, good brother.
Peace, Asar.
Peace.
Just decided to come up and show some support to the show. Not really too much to say.
Dasha Rev says the people were black. Jonathan Wright, regardless. See, people, what y'all got to understand about me is that I'm not arguing against a black Egypt in terms of the people, right? And so that's what me and Garfield are supposed to be debating. If he ever decides to pick a date.
Garfield is not going to debate you, man. He's going to run.
Wait, Garfield doesn't think they were dark-skinned Africans?
No.
Wow.
Or what he's trying to do is try to say that, the ranges of color is from dark to light. So he's he's not committing. He won't say that these were Black African people. He'll just say that they're Africans with a wide range of skin colors, but they have a greater affinity, if I understand his arguments correctly. They have a greater affinity to people in the Middle East than with quote unquote sub-Saharan Africans. So I think I'm conveying his argument right. But that's not my, like, I'm arguing that they're Black folks. Where me and Jonathan Owens, and not the one that's married to Simon Bowles, but where we differ is on the meaning of the place name Kemet in terms of its etymology and its application. And so while I can argue, for example, that these were Black people by modern definitions of what Black people are, my argument is that they did not self-identify as Black people. And that's what Jonathan is arguing, essentially. That not only does the word Kemet mean Black, but that it's used in a modern context and that they self-identified as Black. But he even kind of squirms on that and says that, I'm not saying fully that that's what they're doing, but they did, like he's going the route of there's people with the name Kim and that it's applied to describe their physical characteristics. And so he's trying to wedge his way into an argument that they had essentially a race consciousness in the same way that we do now. And so he's trying to leave room open for the greater
between you two parties. Is I'm linguistics is not my biggest is not really what I'm interested in, but what I think is actually cool is that at least you're reviewing his work and you're at least supporting him. I think that's good. So it's better than arguing about rap videos and stuff like that.
Yeah, I don't do the
rah-rah.
Yeah, like that's not the school that I came in from. Like, like a lot of the folks that are on YouTube, they have other interests, and they come from various walks of life outside of an academic space, but are trying to have academic arguments without going through academic processes, academic organization, academic methods. And so this is why you get all the arguing and flim flam, like it's barbershop talk, and these personal vendettas against each other because they don't understand the academic process. And so I was thrust into this conversation via an academic process. So remember, like as I stated at the beginning of the book in the introduction, how I even got involved in this conversation was going into college in the late 90s. And, that's in the middle or really kind of the tail end of the Martin Bernal debates and the large scale attack on Afrocentricity and all of that. And when I started examining the arguments from all the scholars who were making, pro and con arguments regarding the Blackness of the ancient Egyptians, on the African-centered side, they would rely heavily on Cheikh Anta Diop's argument that, they were Black, and they told us that they were Black because the name Kemet itself means Black people and not Black soil, as the Egyptologists try to inform us, right? And so the book itself is dedicated to this gentleman here. Let me share my screen again. Let me go back up to the top. So when you get the text, you'll see that it is dedicated to this gentleman here. This is Dr. James L. Conyers, who passed away a couple of years ago. And when I was in his office, as I would, find myself doing quite a lot when I was at the University of Houston, he and I, and he's my frat brother as well. And so he and I were having a conversation on ancient Egypt, identity, research methods. Like, he's written a couple of texts on research methods in Africana studies. And he's written a lot of texts and edited a lot of works too. So he's really kind of a giant in this Africological space. And so during that year in 2002 was an Africana Studies symposium that was being held at the University of Houston in the fall. And so he, looking at my essential questions regarding Kemet and all this, he told me to write an article and to submit an abstract for the article and submit it to the symposium. And, he let me into the symposium, but the symposium was nothing but PhDs and PhD students in Africana, a wide range of subject matter. And so the objective was to point me to get me into the academic space and to learn how to write and to present academic arguments and to get feedback from scholars in the field. This is where I first met Dr. Mario Beatty back in the day when he had hair. So if you see one of the videos of Dr. Mario Beatty speaking on Shekinah Job, that's me behind the camera. And I'm the one who posted that video up on YouTube. And so you might find it on a couple other people's channels because they didn't download it and re-uploaded it. But this is the person who first shot me in there to get, eaten by the wolves, so to speak. But they didn't do me too.
Yeah.
This is, they gave me good feedback and I got connections and that's where it expanded in terms of the research. And so a lot of folks don't have these experiences with being able to present these ideas at conferences, having to write, having to defend your positions against academics and the like, and having to represent an organization, a school of thought, and the like. And this is why we get the kind of craziness that we have in this community, where there's a lot of backbiting and talking about each other in videos with people's names disrespectfully in the titles and the like. And when people start coming wanting to learn information, and that's the first thing that they see coming out of the so-called African-centered space, this is detrimental to the objectives of what Africana studies, Africology, and the like is about, because they haven't gone through that training. I've gone through Africology training, so I know how to represent the ideas. I know the research methods. I know who the big players are in the field and what the arguments are and the like, and how to use, for example, location theory when trying to ascertain the nature of an argument by a particular researcher and the like. Because of growing up, intellectually in these spaces. Even though my first training is in computer science. My minor training was in African studies. And so you know, I can't make arguments for or against Jonathan Owens without actually reading his text. That just comes with the territory.
Right.
Unfortunately, a whole bunch of people will have opinions about my work and never read it.
Never put in the work.
And that's not how you do it. So, you know, I already know the larger stint of his arguments because we've been going back and forth, but it's different when you put it on paper. So now I can hold you to something. Because, you know, people be changing their minds on the internet and you know, hope that we didn't see that video or we forgot.
Right.
That this was your position, you know, 4 months ago, and now you're on something else. But what's on your mind, Brother Zoo?
No, I agree with you, man. I think these topics have to be respected, man. They're heavy topics, you know. We got these big interests. We got these things that we want to discover about the past 2,000 years ago. That's not going to happen, you know, overnight. You know, and I think a lot of times people try to cram all this stuff into arguable points, you know, and in the end, the audience loses, the people lose. You know what I mean? But I think I don't think I'm in a position to have a hard stance on it on the Kemet word. I don't lean towards Kemet meaning land of the black people outright. You know what I'm saying? But I somewhere I do think that there was a notion of using the color black as a descriptor within the society, but that still doesn't say that it's what we use today. That's something that's completely different. It has some different connotations, different histories. But I do think that these notions are related ultimately, just by the force of history. Like in West Africa, there's certain people who use black, but even then, it's not a primary identifier, you see. So there'll be a theological element attached to it and a social element attached to it. But and maybe that's part of the argument too that is going by the wayside, that you know, trying to define the Egyptians in this one thing. You know what I mean? I think that that's always going to leave us frustrated.
Yeah, there's so many things that you have to think about. And you know, again, when you are doing research along these lines, you have to, again, science is about hypothesis testing and falsification. And you know, there's so many steps that you have to go through. For example, you have to make an argument that there was even a national identity to begin with. Because there are some researchers who argue, and this is something that I'll be discussing in volume 2, that ancient Egypt never had a national identity. If ancient Egypt, let's just say for the sake of argument that that's true, if the ancient Egyptians never had a national identity, what does that do to your argument that they named themselves the blacks? And or let's just say that they did have some people that were black and named themselves black. Were they the minority or the majority? And if you are the majority, why would you name yourself black? But if you are the minority, who was the majority?
My only thing about that particular argument is that Kim can mean dark or black. So Kim could mean a rain. You know what I mean?
But Kim can also mean complete and perfect. And
right.
when you look at some of the names, even when you read ranks, this is one of the reasons why at the back of the book I put the names. I have a whole edition. Matter of fact, let me just show you what I mean here, because you have to be able to go through and establish
what the black actually means, or what the Kim actually means.
Exactly. And so, you know, these are, in this section here is where I'm showing dictionary and other encyclopedia entries for Kim, right? And it's many. And so I have here the personal names containing Kim. So I say the following is a non-exhaustive list of personal names that contain the KM consonant sequence in them. Some of the names have clear meanings, others do not. It is kind of hard to make out some of the meanings since classifiers are seldom employed. But these are listed here as grounding for further research, right? Here's the source material. If you don't have the book, the original book is in German. So they have a kind of an English translated form in English. I mean, online, I should say. And so, hold on.
And the only reason I say that is because I feel like it's possible that nobility, hypothetically, nobility or some sense of royalty could have been attached to some idea of blackness that may not have been even ultimately related to skin, you know. And that's the other thing too, like when people are having these arguments, we're talking about like 3,000 years of a written record, 3,000 years of a civilization, or whenever the word came into use, you know, over that time. So it would have to be in context of what's happening socially and politically in ancient Egypt.
All right, what I have here is an example of what I mean. So like people, when they see Kim, they automatically start thinking black, but not understanding that in African languages, you have names for people with meanings meaning complete or perfect. Like when you say something is complete or full, the English synonym is perfect, perfection. It's just like when you see nefer, there's a word nefer meaning complete, but there's also a nefer meaning the perfect. And I'm going to do a show in the future showing that the word nefer is still used in Bantu languages in East Africa with the same meanings as what you find in ancient Egypt, right? And so you have this form of the word here, kimu, Kim, the perfecter, not the black, the perfecter. If I go here, the one with a perfect heart, Kim Ib. And it's talking about the king. The king is Kim Ib like Tho, right? And these are names. So this is the perfecter,
The one of perfect heart.
You know, and this one, like when you say Kim Atef, you know, the particular snake who completes his time, right? Or whose power is complete. It's just like when you say in the Bantu language, Kalunga, like, or Atum. So, and I show in here that Kim, complete, and Tim, complete, are the exact same word. And so just like when you say Atum is the complete or the perfect one, is just like when you talk about Kalunga in the Bantu languages. It's more specifically in Kikongo. So when you hear Fukiao talking about Kalunga, the completely complete being, you know, one who lacks for nothing, one who is everything, who has everything together, who's solid. Like there's layers to the meaning.
Right.
But if without any kind of determinatives, you just automatically see Kim in the name and think that it has something to do with skin color. And so this is what we mean by not going with our first mind. We don't do lookership, because a researcher is going to automatically understand and know this wide variety of possibilities, and then they're going to put together the experiments to falsify the competing hypotheses. And that's what a lot of folks aren't doing. They're just going like anytime they say KM together, they automatically, this is black. That's not how this is done.
In Wolof, for instance, you got a lot of terms that have that KM sequence, and if you consider Wolof, which would be the hypothetical reconstructed form of Wolof, which is not really reconstructed, but so you have Kuma, which is chief of the initiates, right? And then you have Kumba, which is a title for deities, for female deities.
All right, peace, everybody. Thanks for having me on.
Peace. And if you notice, there's that B there on the feminine word. So essentially, basically, I'm just saying, if you didn't have the vowels, you would need context, and you would need something like determinative.
Exactly. And this is something that, let me see if I can find it. Muba Binge Bilolo. And why is all this? Oop, it's because I'm misspelling stuff. That would help. There we go. So here's Bilolo. This is when I brought Dr. Bilolo to the University of Houston.
Bilolo.
And let me go Chrome tab. And there we go. Share. So let me see if I can find.
You ever end up getting in contact with him again for a new interview or anything like that?
No, because I think he had, when I tried again, he was in the midst of travel to Congo, and I didn't double check to see if he was back in Belgium. So this is the part of the discussion where he's talking about Kim, for example, just in the same way that you said, right? But her translations isn't the best.
I remember.
I get a whole bunch of Like somebody just the other day, like I forgot about this video, but someone's like, her translation is terrible. And I have
You know what?
I have this.
I saw her in a recent video, which is so crazy. I think I saw her in a recent video. I gotta remember which one it was, but I recognize her face. She got a face that's very recognizable.
Yeah, to her credit, again, this was all last minute. So what happened was Bilolo, he has a daughter that was going to school in DC, and she was getting her PhD in like finance, right? And so he came from Belgium to watch his daughter graduate, him and his wife.
That's dope.
And however, Bilolo has family that lives in Dallas, Texas. And he was so he went to go visit while he watched his daughter graduate. He made a stop through Texas so that he can visit his family members there in Dallas. And so, but when he came, he wanted to go to New Orleans to do kind of his own pilgrimage to Congo Square. And so on his way to New Orleans, so, you know, I mean, he could have went other routes, but he decided to go down, I guess, what highway is that? 45? I guess I-45 down to Houston and then go I-10 to New Orleans. So in his route going to New Orleans, he was a stop in Houston. So he hit me up and was like, hey, I'm coming through Houston and I would like to, you know, meet up with you. And, you know, if you can, you know, get some people together, we can, you know, do a lecture. So it was at last minute that I put it together. And I had to find somebody who spoke French well enough to translate.
Dope.
And so she was a student at the time, kind of learning. So she's from Nigeria. And so, you know, she was at the beginning stages of that process. So we just kind of threw her to the wolves. And, you know, I'm like, you know, whatever imperfections are there, we'll correct it later. And I just have yet to do it. I have the whole thing transcribed in French and translated into English. I just have to do another video doing the closed caption. Right. But anyway, all that to say, this is his commentary on Kemet.
Translation in there.
Transliteration.
Oui, transliteration m'a aussi permise de constater que, en fait, quand on dit Kemet,
we allowed him to discover that when we say Kemet,
mais pas seulement Kemet,
so not only Kemet,
que tout c'était souvent qu'on place à la fin, pas tout, mais qui est comme suffixe et qu'on appelle marque du féminin,
that is as a suffix mark,
n'est rien d'autre que les chi ou les ti, vous pouvez aussi dire les ti, les di, préfixes de langue bantu.
Yeah, so it's nothing more than just C, T, and D as a prefix in the Bantu language.
Hold on 1 second, just to explain. In the Egyptian language, a lot of words that end in the T is what we call a feminine suffix. And so just like in the French language, they have masculine and feminine nouns. The Egyptian has a masculine and feminine noun. So that word Kemet, how we transliterate it, KM.T, that T is a suffix. So what he's saying is that suffix in the Shiluba language is prefixed, and it's prefixed with those three sound pronunciations, C, T, and D. So for those who don't understand that, the Egyptian transliteration lingo, I'm sorry.
Non pas dans l'ancien égyptien, dans les Chicas, mais plutôt dans l'espéranto égyptologique. Il y a une nuance.
Okay, so not just the ancient Egyptian language, but also
Donc,
more,
quand vous
more on
lisez
the
ceci, ce n'est pas égyptien. Ce mot-là n'est pas égyptien.
this word
C'est
is
la
not Egyptian.
transcription occidentale, pour ainsi dire.
And my bad for the camera zooming in and out. This when I first bought the camera in the late 2010s. I think this was a 2009 or 2010 when this was filmed. So that's when I first got that camera, and I didn't know how to work it just yet. So I do apologize for that sound.
Okay, so that's the Western transcription.
Yeah.
Et la grammaire qui se déduit de ça, donc ils ont élaboré la grammaire à partir de leur transcription.
Okay, so they elaborated the grammar from this transcription, this Western transcription.
C'est logique, mais c'est faux.
This is logical, but it's false.
Logique et faux. Je dis bien ceci pourquoi. Alors, je dis non, il ne faut pas dire comme ça. Ce n'est pas une théorie que j'élabore, c'est plutôt un mot que je connais. Vous sentez la nuance? Le mot s'appelle chikam.
Okay, so it's not a word he's elaborating, it's a word he knows. The word is called
Ça
chikam.
vient du mot kam, kama. Mais ça peut être kama, ça peut être comme, ça peut être kum, ça peut être kim, ça peut être kem. Vous voyez comment je continue la réflexion. Et tous ces mots s'utilisent, ce sont des mots qui existent, qu'on utilise aujourd'hui dans la plupart des langues bantu, et qui sont tous utilisés en Chiluba. Kem, du kema, kem c'est s'émerveiller. Donc quand tu t'émerveilles, on dit ah, quelque chose d'extraordinaire. Donc c'est que le travail qu'il fait, je dirais Malou Adikema ou Malou Adikema. Donc ce qu'il a fait là, appartant donc de la formation d'ingénieur vers les résultats qu'il a, c'est quelque chose de merveilleux. Donc quand je l'ai dit, il comprend. Donc ce n'est pas, on n'a pas besoin d'étudier l'égyptologie. Vous demandez seulement à quelqu'un. Je dis ça pourquoi? Parce que les égyptologues ont cru qu'en faisant en jouant comme ça dans Wikipédia et dans leurs livres, ils utiliseraient les mots qui seraient purement fantaisistes, alors que ce mot s'utilise aujourd'hui.
So, let me go back a little bit. So here he's saying that all these words that we see, kama, kom, kem, all these words already exist in the Bantu language. So he doesn't have to go to Egyptology to know the meaning of these words.
Et je ne suis pas sûr qu'ils connaissent le mot.
And he's not sure that they even know the meaning of these words themselves.
Les signes, donc je vais y revenir. Kim, c'est courir, entre autres, Kim, c'est courir, mais ça peut aussi dire tonner. Hein. Quand quelqu'un on dit, donc le makima, donc Kim, courir, Kim, d'être audacieux, courageux. Toi, si je dois, on dit Kim. Kum, c'est battre. Soit battre des tambours ou battre quelque chose ou quoi. Le coup, donc, quand il y a le tremblement, on dit chikuma. Donc, quand il y a des tremblements de terre, c'est le chikuma. C'est pourquoi vous trouvez aussi kum dans le terme qui signifie chef, donc quelqu'un de poids.
Okay, saying chikuma here usually means like earthquake, tremble of the earth, and you can and from there you said ches, like the weight of a chief. So that's kind of the origin of that.
Comme c'est repasser.
Okay, so to iron.
Finir.
To finish.
Donc oui, finir, donc parachever. Donc quand vous faites le travail, on fait comme ça, on dit comment donc terminer, conclure, donner la conclusion.
So come is to finish and to iron.
Et kam a en Chiluba d'aujourd'hui plus d'une quinzaine de sens.
So kama has more than 15 different meanings.
C'est pour cela quand les gens discutent, disent ah, calme, voici les filles noires seulement, ainsi de suite. Ça, c'est vraiment la discussion de plus bas niveau qui puisse exister.
So this discussion about the different meanings of Hama is the lowest sort of.
Donc, le plus level, le plus bas des discussions.
The lowest level of discussion, scientific discussion you can have about the word Hama.
Ce n'est pas une discussion scientifique.
Oh, it's not a scientific discussion.
Et les Africains doivent éviter
And Africans have to avoid
de réduire les débats ou de tomber dans le piège de la réduction.
Okay, so they have to avoid reducing the significance of this debate, or actually they have to avoid falling into the trap of reducing.
Parce que même les dictions. I'm gonna pause it right there, but because that's the main point that I wanted to get to, was that, you know, what Bilolo is saying there is that, you know, essentially it's unscientific to try to reduce every single KM consonant sequence to a word meaning black. That there's various homographs and homonyms in the language, and its various usages and expanded meanings of these particular terms, that you have to be very cognizant of this, and it's very unscientific to even try to reduce everything to Kim Black. And so he's just showing, just like what you said in terms of Wolof. Mm-hmm. If we was to, you know, just look at the consonant sequences, you would see this variety. And like this is where semantics and come into play. Like, for example, there's this word that is cognate with Kemet that you find in, so I'll just share my whole screen here. Let me take that off for a second. And so, like, this is from my book here, and just like how you have, so notice, all right, so let me see. In this section here, I am showing that I showed earlier that the KM consonant sequence in Chiluba corresponds to the KM consonant sequence in Egyptian. Here I also showed that the same consonant KM sequence in Chiluba corresponds to the M.H and that .HM. This is the same consonants in reverse sequence, right? And so there's this word, this .HM, meaning majesty, chief, sovereign, is cognate with Chiluba Kum, chief, or someone with social weight. So remember, if you heard Bilolo mentioning one of those Kims as someone with, you know, great social weight, a chief, this is how you would say it in Chiluba. And then you have Wakam or Chikomo, meaning chief, right? And there's a different variant of it, because when the K becomes K and K becomes F. So when you see Mfumu, chief, king, president, master, boss, owner, this is a variant of the same word for Kim, which is richly Kum or Kam or Komo, or Him, majesty, chief, sovereign, in the Bantu language. But also that same KM sequence in Egyptian corresponds to Bantu SL, right? And meaning chief, and here's another variant of it, but here's some other forms in other Bantu languages of Mfumu, chief, in Kikongo, Lingala, Nkumu, traditional religious chief, Banda, Kumu, head leader, Zande, Kuumba, husband, who of course is the head of household, Bambara, Kum, head leader, Mongo, Inkum, Kuba, Kum, Kuma, Zing, Nkum, etc., right? But I want to go now to the Chiluba online dictionary.
So we have that form in that word. Salah also is a SK correspondence to Egyptian Kim. And so that word that is perfect also, or complete, excuse me, also means, for example, the semantics of chishiki, right? The root word being shiki means perfect, but also authentic and true. So if we was to go back to the like, for example, the perfecter, one who completes his time, the power is complete. The sense, the possible sense of the literal word meaning complete and perfect is used in a way, just like in Chiluba Chishiki, to mean authentic and true. One who is true, a Kim. So you have to know semantics, and again, what is possible. You got to know what is possible to then design the experiments and to know what to look for to verify or falsify the hypothesis. And so this is why, we continually try to emphasize that you just don't go with your first mind. Everything isn't as it seems. And you're thinking that something means one thing when in fact it means something else. So you're looking at the perfecter, one who is complete, one who is true, one who is authentic. Kim can also be a root for something that is strong, stable. So if you have Ni Pepe Kim, is it because of his black skin? Or is it a reflection of his character? Or is it just simply a distinguisher from a person who's also named that same name? Like, there's so many things that you have to falsify first before you start making arguments. And this is, what I'm essentially, trying to stress in these discourses, pertaining to this word here.
Word. I got one question for you. What do you see with the sequence KM having to do with deities?
Again, it is it's situationally specific.
Situationally specific.
Situationally specific, because it could be, again, the perfecter, again, one who is true, one who is authentic. It could be one who is black, or it could just be a word for bull, like in the case for, in associations with Osiris. Because we also got to keep in mind that the Egyptians did plays on words.
Well, yeah, that's one of the reasons why I'm asking, and not even so much for Osiris, even though he's part of it.
Mm-hmm.
So in the paradigm I'm looking from, you have a very similar system in the Senegambia, where there's a river god and these other minor deities that often live on the edges of water and who have these KM sequences. So it's curious to see this in Egyptian to some extent, but as you said, I can't really go much further than that, being that it's a situational thing. You know what I mean? It could have even started as some similar, and over time, Kim replaced with another Kim sequence or some other association because of paronymy. But I don't know. That's something that's interesting to me because that play on words of Kim, also having to do with the sides of things. Osiris found on his side, Her Gesef, et cetera, et cetera. So it's an interesting conversation. I purposefully have been kind of staying away from it and just looking from the sidelines for real. So, you know.
Yeah, it's more involved than people want to admit. And that's the problem. It's we don't want to do the work, right? And we think like I think the conversation, and before we move forward, I just want to say welcome to the panel. You're going to have to pronounce your name for me.
It's like 4 consonants in a word.
Hey, my name's called Undalud Denchem, but it's just my first name is Indalagani, so I just Denchem's like a Ghanaian name in the back.
Peace,
guys. Peace. Am I able to ask a question, Asar?
Yeah, hold on one second though. I'm gonna get right back to you, but I just wanted to make sure that I acknowledge you and bring you in. So, what I was saying is that it's involved. The conversation is very involved, and like people don't understand that they are at a different level of the conversation and want to have the more advanced discussion, but don't want to do the basic work. And so this is why they're having, in my personal opinion, silly arguments talking about experts. Like scientists don't even talk like that. They could care less. You know, this is one of the reasons why, like in modern
experts,
journals,
I know Dr. Beatty is at that conference in Senegal. Have you been watching that or hooked up in any way or had time?
I didn't even know he was there.
Yeah.
But you know, the whole concept of the experts, right? When you are in conversation with the experts, they don't refer to the experts. They refer to the evidence. And this is why, like, when you are reading like journals, they don't even let you know what school or what institute that they represent and the like, because they're trying to base it off of the merits of the article itself instead of the prestige of the institution or the person who is writing the article. In other words, they're trying to avoid the stigma of this person's an expert here so that you can just concentrate on the information. But you, in this community, they have it backwards. You know, they only do this when it comes to people that agree with their position. Because if you find another expert with the same or more qualifications that come with an opposing argument, then that person don't know what they're talking about, or they try to dismiss them.
If you bring an African-centered scholar, you 9 times out of 10, they're not 10 out of 10, they're not going to agree. And then when you bring a white scholar that says with the Afrocentric scholar, they're gonna mess around and call that person a black nationalist. It's madness.
Exactly. And this is why, like, you can tell who's not serious, because when you get to this level of scholarship, they don't you never hear scholars talking about what the experts say. They always they understand, one, that there are schools of thought, and these particular schools of thought have a particular paradigm that their research falls under, in certain arguments and a certain approach that, you know, they go under. And you may exist in another paradigm, and y'all are competing paradigms.
Mm-hmm.
And so what ends up happening is that, you know, the lay persons in our community will find some information from one paradigm and think that is consensus for the entire field.
And that's also my problem with people's over reliance on any said consensus or expert, and when it gets too close to appeal to authority, especially when the other side of the contrast is African-centered scholars, and you positioning yourself as somebody who knows the history, right? And you know that science as a method is democratic, but science as an institution requires money. You know, so if you're not seeing as many African-centered scholars in the same spaces as you're seeing these other scholars, it's for the simple fact that they're being ignored because people they have the privilege to do that.
Hold on. I'm going to read this, and I'm going to get to our other panelists real quick, if I could just find it. So, did I? Hold on. Because there is, okay, so I'm holding in my hand this book. Dang it, maybe I can turn down this brightness a little bit on this.
Like in that Afro-Asiatic book, there's a part where they say they point out how they have wrongly dismissed African-centered scholars in the past.
Dang it, you can't. Well, the book that I'm holding is so bright, at least on my screen, that you can't see that mud because of the reflection.
You gotta bring it closer.
Yeah, see the light is just so bright.
There you go. You almost have it.
Hold on, let me see if I can reduce the brightness again. No, there we go. So, Race and Identity in the Nile Valley: Ancient and Modern Perspectives. Edited by Caroline Fleur Lebon and Carissa Rhodes. Right, these are two white women, for the record, just in case. And my light doesn't want to stand still now. What to go on? There we go. All right. So the editor at the beginning, and this is why I have to highlight the whiteness of the editors here. And so she makes a statement. Let me see, because this is in the introduction, right? So she says, it is expected that Afrocentric writers will be scholars of African descent. Because, of course, you know, people are interested in their own history. So, of course,
right.
Europeans will be interested in European history, Native Americans. But when it comes to Black folks in African history, of course, it's just expected
at least the majority.
Exactly, is going to be African people. So it's expected that Afrocentric writers will be scholars of African descent. Subsequently, they can be ignored by Western academia as non-Western, fanatically and illogically polemic, and therefore marginal. In contrast, when scholars of European origin take an Afrocentric perspective, controversy ensures, because academia cannot so easily dismiss the research of one of their own. And then they go into Martin Bernal. Had Bernal resisted this commercial pressure, because at first the book was to be titled African Athena, but the publishers, nudged him into titling it Black Athena because of the controversial title, which would put some buzz to sell more books.
Mm-hmm.
So had Bernal resisted this commercial pressure, the racializing of his book might not have occurred. So it is repeatedly that the controversial question of ancient Egyptian racial identity is also valued or equally devalued in terms of the skin color of the authors. For the record, both editors of this volume are American women of European origin. So they tell you right here that they white women, right? But there's another section on here, I could have sworn I highlighted it, where she specifically states that they essentially dismiss African scholars or ignore them. And so when people start talking about, why aren't these Black scholars in certain publications or in certain schools, or, they label them on the fringes, is because of the power dynamic of the university system and the journal system. And they just summarily dismiss and ignore them without engaging the scholarship critically. And so this is acknowledged by, two white women, whose focus is Nile Valley archaeological studies.
And you know what's so crazy is checking out that conference and peeping that you have scholars like Vanessa Davies and what's her Sally Ann Ashton, Dr. Sally Ann Ashton, and some others who are participating. Mm-hmm. My bet from the outside looking in is that more white scholars, more Western scholars, whether Black or white, who might have leaned in a certain kind of way, are going to find that their information is more appreciated in this other school of thought, and that it actually gets further.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, man. Go ahead, my bad. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, like, I talk with Dr. Davies all the time.
Right. So the divide that people think is there is not really there,
Mm-hmm.
And the more you get interested into this work, you see that the dialogue is happening way more than you might think.
Exactly. And I'm going to be doing a presentation kind of outlining this division in academia and how they try to downplay different African scholars. And so you always have to keep this in mind when you are evaluating Africological arguments and then trying to use so-called consensus, which there was never any census done to get the opinions, saying of these particular researchers. People were using these terms out of context. But, I won't go any further. But and you said you pronounce it Indelu or Indelu? How you say it again?
Yeah, Indelu.
Okay, Indelu.
Yeah, Indelu.
Peace and blessings, and welcome to the Mbongi.
Peace and blessings, Asar, and fellow brother. Thank you for allowing me on the talk. It's a pleasure to be here. So I just wanted to just ask about the Sumerian case.
All right.
And, I've always had an interest in Iraq, right? It's a huge interest in, like Iraq and some of the Black people that are there at the moment, who were transported there in the East Atlantic slave trade and the Arab slave trade. I just want to understand what the general gist of the Sumerian argument used to be, that the Sumerians is a language isolate, that it has no similar languages out there to it. It's just something we don't know about. But your argument, your findings have proved that Sumeria is connected to an Afro-Asiatic language compound. Am I correct? I just wanted to get the general understanding of it, the argument.
Alrighty. I wouldn't use the term Afro-Asiatic.
Okay.
But just that it is related to African languages, such as, Bantu languages, ancient Egyptian, etc. But so this has been, you know, a constant issue, like when I first approached this study, and that is seems to be this belief that you can make an argument for something or against something without doing any kind of serious and systematic test to make that argument. So to make this plain, so when they say that Sumerian is a language isolate, what they did is they tried to compare Sumerian languages or Sumerian to the Semitic languages in any kind of that was just immediately around it.
Got it.
And since it appears that it was not related to any of the languages immediately around it, they automatically labeled it an isolate and said that there's no languages that are related to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so when other folks, there's all kinds of arguments for the relationship between Sumerian and Indo-European and, you know, some other languages out in, you know, further into East Asia. And some will say that it has a kind of like a kind of an Indian substrate or something like that, right? It's all kinds of things. But what I've found is when they try to make this argument, and I ask for, okay, well, who did the work to say that definitively this language is not related, for example, to ancient Egyptian or Bantu languages? Where is that study? Because science cannot tell you the truth. Science is not about truth. What the scientific method can tell you is when something is not true, when it is definitely false.
Got it.
And so, and I know it seems kind of oxymoronic, but that's the nature of it. Because in order to say something is true, you have to be able to do an experiment 24/7, 365 to make sure that every single instance, every single time that you do the experiment, it comes to the same conclusion.
Good.
But that is impossible. It requires a lot of resources, and we just don't have that kind of time. You know, if we throw a pin up 4,000 times, there's a statistical probability that if we throw the pin up one more time, 4,001 times, that the pin is going to fall again. Right? So that's why they do the experiments lots of times to get to a statistical certainty that the probability that if we was to do this experiment again, we'll get the same outcome.
Got it.
But you never know. It may be on the 4,025th try that the pin does not fall but goes up. Right? But you would have to keep doing the experiment to know that, you know. So theoretically, this is why they say that science does not tell you what the truth is. You have it's a probability thing, but they can definitely tell you when something is not it.
Got it.
Because it's not going to. So like if I say if I throw the pin up, you know, then my hypothesis is if I throw a pin directly up vertically, that halfway to its descent is going to automatically move left. Right? Like if I throw the pin up 4,000 times and it just comes straight up and down, you know, the hypothesis has not been confirmed. It has been falsified. That is not on its own just going to go straight to the left. Right? So because it didn't do it at least one time out of the 4,000 times, right? Unlike the other experiment that if we throw the pin up 4,000 times, it went back down to the ground at a particular velocity or whatever, right? But saying all that to say is that when they do this for Sumerian, they'll just automatically dismiss Sumerian and Bantu, but there's no scientific paper that has been done to falsify that hypothesis.
Okay.
And so in order for you to make the claim that something is true, you have to go through a certain level of systematic analysis to come to that conclusion. Well, it's the same thing if you're saying that it's not true.
Right.
To say that something is not true requires the same systematic analysis. And so you just can't just, because you are so-and-so at this institute, because you say it becomes true. No, you have to falsify it.
Right.
So that's what has not been done when it comes to Sumerian.
Understood. And would you say the reason for not doing that, as well as being you could say tardiness and just not wanting to maybe show the African element, would you say another reason to that is to try and delegitimize any African presence in that region, or any sense of comparability to Africa at its zenith, which is ancient Egypt? Would you say that's maybe an ulterior motive for that lack of study?
That may be for some folks. I can't say for sure.
Okay.
But that requires me to, because I would have to know the individual itself, and I can, reading or conversing with certain of those individuals will be able to say more poignantly if that is a factor that I can detect, via our conversation. But I'm not. So I don't know if you was here earlier when I read. And I'm just going to reshare it again. Right. So this is, my book, Race and Identity.
Yes, I saw this one.
In ancient Egypt. And so you see, for example, I'm just citing one text here. This is Harry Johnson, a European who studied Bantu languages in Central and Southern Africa and has written a number of texts in the early 1900s on Bantu languages. But you can, from this paragraph here, he says, but the main principles of Bantu syntax and the instinct for dividing nouns into classes based on quite different distinction from that of sex may have originated in the mind of some white or quasi-white people of the Mediterranean basin, whose speech and cultus preceded in North Africa that of the Libyan, Berber, Egyptian, Hamite, Ethiopian. Such a race of Neolithic, pre-Libyan colonists of North Africa may have been akin to the Pelasgian Aegeans and Crete of the prehistoric Greece and Sicily. So he's saying that essentially, how people try to make this Mediterranean argument, and so he's trying to say that that these Bantu speakers are the result of these white people who existed, or of the same racial stock that stretched from Libya, Egypt, Middle East, and even the early Greeks before the Proto-Indo-European speakers moved on the island. Whatnot. And so hold on one sec. I just want to go down. He says the late Sir Richard, so here we go. So all we have any right to surmise is that the Bantu and semi-Bantu languages were created by the impact of the Negroes of the Central Sudan of a Mediterranean race speaking a language which preceded the advance of the Aryan, Hamitic, or Semitic tongues. And so what he's trying to argue is that these Mesopotamians, these white Mesopotamians, came into Africa and then brought in their language and, of course, civilization, and created the Bantu languages. Right. And so the resemblances that we're seeing here, because I got to go back up to this this sentence right here where he says the only language families outside of Africa which offer the slightest affinity in any way with Bantu tongues are the Sumerian and the Dravidian groups. But he can't even conceptualize that the Africans left Africa and ended up in these spots, and that these are the remnants of African languages. It has to be these white Mediterraneans who came into Africa and settled into Central Africa as what they would call dark whites, these Caucasian folks, and brought, they brought the Bantu language from the Mediterranean into Central Africa. That's what he's essentially trying to argue. So he acknowledges the affinities between Sumerian and Bantu, but his racial consciousness cannot see the Bantu coming out of Africa into the Mesopotamia. It has to be the white Mesopotamians coming into Africa and giving the Africans their language.
Right. So that's kind of what I was going to ask you. Like, what do you see as the historical scenario for the manifestation of this relation in language, and also so basically that kind of also supports the idea that many researchers cannot help their own bias and applying it to historical populations, and so people can't really fathom a darker skinned population from Africa being the population of prestige in these kinds of settings is what I'm getting for real.
Hold on one sec, because I'm going to have to remind people the hypothesis that I bring forth, but it's better articulated in Umoja Volume 2. So now I'm going to go all the way to the back. So this is where I made my essential arguments in conjunction and in alignment with Jean-Claude Mboli. I think he provides, one of the best models that coincides with my independent research in this area regarding, for example, Sumerian. Now, in his text, he considers Sumerian, but he doesn't do a deep dive into the Sumerian language. He just does a cursory glance at Sumerian and the Bantu languages. But so this is what I try to articulate in Umoja Volume 2 in terms of where is I'm trying to find so I'm establishing here the notion of the convergence, and I'm trying to find my modified map. So I don't have my physical book on me. Let's see, do I have it here? So I may have to. So, I mean, this will be able to convey graphically what I'm talking about, at least a little bit. So using this river model, or this delta kind of model. So imagine that A, B, and C are different languages. They can be related or unrelated, right? And they meet up at different times and interact with each other. So this language A is independent from language B, is independent from language C. But at some point in time, B and C get closer together and they converge in a place. And the convergence of B and C creates this D, either language or series of other different languages that have now become similar to each other as a result of long-term interactions. So now this D convergence area, now these people from A come and meet up with these people from D. And over time, they converge and you have language E. And then E evolves into F itself. So B, A, or C independent, none of these are the proto-language to language F, because they've all merged at different points in time. So this is kind of what they call like a river model. So like if you have a river running here and you have these tributaries that kind of merge into one river. So like if we think about the Nile, so imagine this is the white Nile, this is the blue Nile, and they all meet up here in Sudan. It becomes just one river Nile. But these are different tributaries that come in and contribute to, you know, the strength of this one river going here. But it can also happen in the reverse, to where you have this one language that splits into two different dialects, and then this one dialect continues to evolve into language M over here. But this one dialect itself splits into two dialects, but then they come back together and merge at some point later in the future. So this river delta model kind of explains, kind of, you know, puts a possible scenario for what happened, for example, with Semitic languages, what happened with Sumerian, right? And so like what I do in this chapter is provide you with the various source material that shows you that these Africans have been moving and traveling back and forth between the Middle East and Africa for very long periods of time. And these migrations and back migrations are kind of going like with this river delta model. And you start getting these scenarios where, you know, we hate to use the term mixed language, but you know, it's kind of like with English, you know, when the French took over Normandy and was ruling for such a long time, French was the language of prestige. But then the Angles, or the English, you know, won their freedom, and English became the language of prestige and the language of writing. But beforehand, there was no English writing. And so, but what you get now is you have this Germanic language with a whole bunch of French and Latin vocabulary and even some grammatical features. It's still, you know, when we closely examine it, a Germanic language, but you notice that English doesn't have that same feel as the other Germanic languages like Dutch and German, for example.
Right.
And that's because of the influence of French and Latin. And so again, as I've articulated here, you know, we have this branch of Negro Egyptian, or China Intu is what I call it, which forms what I call pre-Proto-Bantu, and it split into modern Bantu and then this para-Bantu Bere. because of the Berry branch of Negro Egyptian. And it's from this branch that Sumerian came and Middle Egyptian came, and then Hausa, Zande, and Bambara. And so Sumerian was the last of the, I guess, quote unquote, pure, if you can even say that, Negro Egyptian or China Intu languages that eventually, died out and the people was absorbed. They came and met up with people that were already there. And so it was the same thing when the Negro Egyptian speakers left the Nile Valley and ended up here in the Levant. There were already people here who spoke languages that we will never know.
Right.
And so that convergence process here created Proto-Semitic. And so I'm trying to find. See, I don't even know what the hell I did. Is it in this book? I know it's in this book. I had to have put it in this book. Or is it in... No. Is it at the beginning? There it is. I had it at the beginning. So this is Mboli's model. This is his updated. Well, I changed the name because this is, for me, his model was confusing because he named the entire thing Negro Egyptian, and then he named this section here Negro Egyptian post-classic or post-classic Negro Egyptian, right? And from this third branch of Negro Egyptian, he said that Semitic came out of it, but Semitic was not a Negro Egyptian language. I'm like, how is this a branch of Negro Egyptian and you name it Negro Egyptian, but Semitic not be a branch of Negro Egyptian? Like you're confusing things. So that's why I renamed the entire thing the Chiankanda Chikulu, right? Language family. And then, these are the three original branches of Chiankanda language family. And Chiankanda is just another way of saying the word Kemet in a Bantu language. And so these two branches here, so that's what these arrows indicate, that they have been interacting with each other and sharing features. And so it's because of these interactions that this branch 1 and this branch 2 came the what now I call China into, but what he calls post-classic Negro Egyptian. And so now in his new book that's coming out, so this is the updated model that I was privy to, and he allowed me to put it in here and to modify the titles. But he said that his book is ready and it should be out coming like the end of February or so. So just a heads up for those for the second book. But it'll be dealing with Proto-Indo-European and Semitic. But so this group here, this group is the Kikwe group and the Kweki group and the Kikuki group. And so these two heavily interact, become China into, and then you get two branches out of the China into, which is the Bere branch and the Behir branch. But all of these throughout time have been interacting with each other. So what he says here is that there was this third branch, the Kikuki group, that became the pre-Proto-Semitic, but pre-Proto-Semitic is the result of the interactions between the Kikuki group and the Behir dialects of China Intu. And then the pre-Proto-Semitic interacted with the Proto-Bantu, and this is where you get Proto-Semitic from. So this is his argument here, right? And it's along the same line. So what is Sumerian is a branch of this Proto-Bantu group that went out of Africa into the Mesopotamian era, but was not part of that the Proto-Bantu group that created Proto-Semitic. So if we can imagine, for example, like if somebody went through, so like this Proto-Semitic, this Proto-Bantu group went through the Nile Valley, but it's possible that this other Proto-Bantu group went directly like across into Arabia and went up. That's why they weren't part of the Proto-Semitic process. And so their interactions with whoever was there near the in Iraq, if I can show a map, let me go back down. Like, so let me blow this up bigger. So because we have different migrations out of Africa, you know, over time. So of course, this is the earliest. So this is coming from the National Geographic, and I cite the source in here in this particular map. So if you look at this map, so there's a group of people. So this is around the area of the pre-Proto-Bantu speakers that I argue or it may have been below that. Nope. I have to, before I go back there. Anyway, so there's a group that left here that, you know, became, you know, the Southern Indians and migrated all. But notice that based on a genetic profile, there's a group that came out of India back over here into what is Kuwait, Iraq, or whatnot. And these groups, you know, eventually over time and later in history become your folks who became Moroccans and all this other kind of stuff in terms of a back migration. Well, there's a group of Bantu speakers that went out this way and met up with the pre-Semites, the pre-Proto-Semites, and created Proto-Semitic. But there's another group that left out of here and went just directly here. So like with Hermstein and G.J.K. Campbell-Dunn, they argue for like an origin around like Chad or kind of like in the Great Lakes, Congo region, this area. And then they migrated and jumped over this way and then went up. But there was another group that continued on, and in here, and there's two competing hypotheses for the origins of Proto-Indo-European. So some argue the steppes up here, and then there's a minority opinion that argues Mesopotamia in Turkey, in this area. And so Mboli in his new book is arguing, so he says, you know, definitively that the Proto-Indo-European speakers originated from here. And so, you know, we have these interactions of these Negro Egyptian speakers that help to form three different languages: the Sumerian, Proto-Semitic, and Proto-Indo-European here. But in all these scenarios, there was groups that already lived here from the first out of Africa expansion. And so when the Africans came and met these folks, matter of fact, let me Let's see, Bayesian. How do you Bayes?
Yo, what's up? Keep going. I'm gonna definitely hop off though. Peace though.
All right, no doubt. So let me see. So so if you see in this, and I'll make it bigger so everybody can see. So there's an interview of Dr. Christopher Ehret, and he's talking about the development of the Semitic languages. And this is the link in which you can find it. And so he says here that the early Semites were just a few Africans arriving in the Levant to find a lot of other people already in the area. So, for him, at least at the time that he wrote this, he believed that Semitic started in Africa, but his later analysis shows that it was the Levant itself. So we would have to reword this to the pre-Proto-Semites, but it's an African group that left Africa and went into the Levant, and their convergence and interactions create Proto-Semitic and the Semitic languages. And it's the same thing with the Sumerian situation. And so, people think that Africans left Africa only one time, and that's not the case. They left several times throughout history, and we have evidence of their interactions with the indigenous in those particular areas. So I know I took long, but I'm hoping that at least cleared my position regarding your question. If he's still there.
Sorry, could I add? Oh, well, he came back.
Yep.
You there? We can hear you.
Yes, son. Yes, sir. Sorry, my volume cut out. Yes, son. I completely gather the understanding of how the migration happened and the pattern that took place. I think my biggest question is: do you think academia is ready to accept that the hypothesis you put forwards has, not only credibility to it, but you're going to be able to display that? Do you think they're willing to listen, to see the connection?
Maybe not immediately, and I get this all the time from Dr. Shamarka Keita. So when we're in conversations, like, because Shamarka Keita used to fight against a lot of my hypotheses, but every time I would show him, what the case was, he couldn't deny the rigor of my analysis. And so this is one of the reasons why he started rocking with me,
right?
Because he knew that a serious scholar could not dismiss what I was saying, without kind of exposing their biases and the like. And so, but one of the things he always tells me is that your analysis may not be accepted for another 30 years or so, and you got to be content with that. So think about, for example, Cheikh Anta Diop,
of course,
was making arguments in the 1940s and 50s.
Yes.
It's only in 2023 that he's being at least acknowledged by a major museum in agreement with certain of his arguments.
Yes.
This is 50 something years later.
Of course.
So, I can't say. All I can do is to put forth as rigorous an analysis as I can, and then just continue to fight and put this out. Because what's going to always end up happening is that you're going to, anytime you're presenting information that's going to shift the field in terms of its direction and orientation, you're always going to have an uphill battle, because people have settled on a perspective, and a lot of people have built their careers on utilizing and embracing certain paradigms and practices. And so if you come up with something that renders all of their life's works obsolete, then it's going to be a problem, So, but it's always going to be the younger generation who is just looking objectively at all of the oldest. It's just like if you lived at the time of Marcus Garvey, not Marcus, well, I mean Marcus Garvey, but W.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington.
Yeah.
Right. And you're hearing their perspectives and they're going back and forth. You may at the time, because you may roll with one or another, you keep your ideas and stuff separated out of, but the younger generation to come and be like, well, they both were right.
Got it.
Why could we why couldn't we combine this and this? It's the younger generation that don't have a what they say, a dog in the fight.
Yes.
That is going to look at your analysis more objectively and either embrace it or not. So it's just like, with Martin Luther King Jr. or Malcolm X, there was people rocking with both of them during their time, but it wasn't until that generation that came in the 70s and the 80s that really embraced them and rose their name. So if for example, when it came to Malcolm, talking to people in the Nation of Islam, they would have rather, his name faded. But the younger generations was reading his text, listening to his message, and he found a new light with these folks, and they're the ones who raised him, not the people who lived with them. It's the folks that never had and never would have an opportunity to have met them that raised them. So, you just gotta, it's a fight. So you just gotta do your due diligence and just hope that, more prevailing and somber minds, will be able to, really appreciate the work and see it for what it is. Because I've had people who, PhDs, it was like, I was rocking with, Diop on this point, but you helped me to look at, because they went back and analyzed and was like, you know what? No, he didn't show his work, and he didn't do this and this and this, and change their mind. But these are people who have actually read the text, and was able to understand the full analysis. But you have people who don't read or do anything and just come to opinions, and those people you just really can't. There's nothing you can do about them.
Right. Ignorance is bliss.
Indeed.
Right.
Hold on one second. He says, might have got here a bit late. What is the origin of Bantu language? Oral tradition points at Central East Africa, but there is a growing contention in the mainstream that they come from West Africa. Well, that is the more popular argument, regardless, in African language studies, is that they come from, more specifically, in southeastern or southwestern Nigeria. And from there, they migrated through Cameroon and spread first southward, I think, and then westward.
Right. There used to be like a rivers in that place. So it was, as you said before, so it was easy to migrate from West Africa into Northeast, in a sense.
Indeed. And so, but there's a minority opinion that argues that the Bantu languages actually originate in East Africa. I'm one of those people in the minority. Mboli's one, Bilolo's, and there's a few other European scholars. And
Right.
and the reason why is because the oldest forms of words and morphemes are found in the East African Bantu languages, not in the Western Bantu languages. Now, the argument that they make is that the reason why we don't have the old traces of the for example, Proto-Bantu in the Western Bantu languages is because they've been interacting longer with non-Bantu languages and lost all those features. You know, but from a scientific perspective, that is not a solid argument. It's not even a solid argument to make the argument that they originated in Western, because you would have had to have a basis. So if you have no traces of Proto-Bantu in the Western part of the Bantu languages, then you can't just make the argument randomly, because they're trying to solidify this notion of a Niger Congo. And so they're believing that these folks just originate in Western Africa, and they don't originate in West Africa. They originate in East Africa, and they migrated west. And so so they're trying to fit a, what did they say? A square peg into a round hole.
Yes.
And that's what they're doing with the languages. And so it's just a whole mess when it comes to African languages.
Right. But that's for all. I mean, that's the work that you're doing, and the work you're going to inspire other people as well, so to do, because unfortunately this history is being told by people who don't have the best, I think, of African intention in mind. So I mean, I'd say hats off to you for what you're doing and the work you're doing to rectify that issue.
I appreciate it. Yeah, it was real confusing, and it took me a while to get to this level, because again, when you first starting off, you're of course reading the introductory books, and for all intents and purposes, they have to present you with what appears to be a unified front when it comes to the subject matter. But it's only when you start getting into those texts that you have to find deep in the corner of the library, those articles that you have to pay $50 or more for a single article, into these higher level, deeper discussions, do you realize that what seems so solid in the introductory courses is not so solid when the quote unquote experts are talking amongst themselves.
Got it.
You get what I'm saying? So, when I'm drawing from information, I'm drawing from datas and discourses from those conversations, not the the stuff that you could easily find on a Google search, because it's all introductory stuff that they're trying to get you familiar with concepts, in your undergrad years. And so this causes a lot of the confusion too. So this is why I can boldly go anywhere and challenge anyone, for example, on the Afro-Asiatic issue and hypothesis, because I've read the conversations that they're having, and they're like, we don't have much evidence at all of this existing, but since we've already done so much work on it, we'll just keep it instead of starting from scratch and doing it right.
Do you understand? And so I just have one last question, if I may, regarding the lingua file, and how we speak about Semitic and Afro-Asiatic. My understanding is that Obenga had the issue of Afro-Asiatic because it tried to displace the African component of the languages that that's where those Asiatic languages come from. So his philosophy, as I understand it, is that languages like Arabic, Hebrew, and Canaanite, as far as you go, these were originally spoken by African inhabitants who left Africa. Is that correct? Am I correct in saying that? And that's his main issue with the term Afro-Asiatic.
Well, hold on. Let me. Let me see if this conversation is in this slide, because I had. So let me just share my screen. All right, and I'm gonna make this bigger. And we'll just start from the beginning and go, because I did a presentation on this a long time ago. Well, I guess it wasn't that long. It was in June of this year. I say Afro-Asiatic, it's time is to hang it up. Right? So here's a situation in what I was talking about, just as a sidebar. So I'm in this Anatolian Languages and Linguistics Facebook group, and I started doing some comparisons between African languages and Indo-European, right? Because this is mainly a an Indo-European language group. And so this guy here, Michael Schultz, says, please look at the existing Proto-Bantu reconstructions to see all these correspondences are due to chance. So he doesn't think that I know how to do the comparative method and how I can eliminate chance. And so this other guy here, he says, I think you are on to something. The Egyptian are, we'll skip that. So I respond to him. So if you don't know, my Facebook or my government name is Harold Johnson. So this is me, Harold Johnson, right? And so I'm responding to Michael Schultz here, and I think I blow it up here. So yeah, so here we go. So Michael Schultz, I say, greetings, Michael Schultz. We have to keep in mind that in historical comparative linguistics, all that matters is the regularity of sound meaning correspondences. The comparative method is designed to eliminate chance as an explanation for the pattern, and I guess you had to hit see more to see more of it. He replies back, a major problem is that Bantu is a subfamily of a subfamily of a subfamily of Niger-Congo. Suppose your conclusion is correct. How to integrate Indo-European into Niger-Congo, which reaches much deeper into the past? Then I replied, there is no such thing as a Niger-Congo phylum. If there is, can you please show me any text where Niger-Congo has been confirmed via the comparative method? The same for Afro-Asiatic, Khoisan, and Nilo-Saharan. Can you show me valid reconstructions for Niger-Congo that can confirm the alleged subdivisions of the phylum? So he replies, I am one of those Africanists who strongly believe that there will be such reconstructions in the future. In my opinion, there must be bottom-up reconstructions with smaller subfamilies, and this will take much time. But I am confident that we will be successful. What is he telling you here?
Primarily that he's saying that they will be able to prove that the subfamily Niger-Congo exists, and that that's where the Bantu family originates from.
Exactly. So he's admitting here that we don't really have any proof, but we believe. So
yeah,
he believes that Jesus is coming back to rescue them all. You know, that the mythological Jesus of Niger-Congo in Afro-Asiatic is going to come and rescue them. So the reason why I'm confident that I can have these conversations, because I'm reading those texts that tell you that Niger-Congo is not a valid language construct. Right. And the Niger-Congo Afrikaners admit this. They have no reconstructions. There are no sound laws. They don't use the comparative method, et cetera, et cetera. But that's neither here nor there. Let me go back to, because I think do I? Let's see. So here's the map from Christopher Ehret et al. Well, this is just a different map, but this is fundamentally showing where Semitic originates and not in Africa. And, Andrew Kitchen, Christopher Ehret, Shafara Asefa, Connie J. Mulligan, and their text, Bayesian phylogenetic analysis of Semitic languages identifies an early Bronze Age origin of Semitic in the Near East. And so that's in around 3,750 BCE, right? And so they're showing the origins of Semitic here, and then their ultimate spread down into Africa, right? Y'all saw me with this map earlier. You saw that commentary. I'm trying to, oh, no, I don't have it in here. So now I got to find it. Because I have the map that Obinga has.
Right. I just find it fascinating that compared to the comparative research you're showing us, that so many people, like the person you showed on display just now, are going by paradigms that haven't even been established through any verified method. And it's just crazy that when you come into the picture to question it, they find it, what's the word? They find it crazy of how you can question a paradigm that they believe to exist, but really and truly there's no basis for it. So it's almost as if they're telling us what our language is and haven't even established a method to prove it. But when we come along and say this isn't what it is, and we have a method to show that, they say, no, we'll believe in, our belief that we haven't even tested is true. So I just find it very disrespectful and at the same time, very, very ignorant.
Yeah, this is what we got to fight. And it's not even that we're even making up a method. We're just using the standard method,
right?
That all linguists around the world use,
right?
So like there's like if I was to show hold on. Because it's R.W. Dixon. I'm trying to remember if it's in this one. Well, this is if you can read this. So this is coming from a European linguist but he specializes in Austronesian languages, but he's a big name in historical comparative linguistics. And he says there is no reputable historical linguist anywhere in the world who accepts the claims of Greenberg and Ostratus.
Right, Greenberg tried to stratify Afro-Asiatic, didn't he?
Yeah.
Right.
I'm trying to find this particular one quote. Because see, and this is another thing that so in this book here, aerial diffusion and genetic inheritance, problems in comparative linguistics, is edited by these two. This is R.M.W. Dixon here, and this is Alexandra Y. Achenwald. Like they make this statement in the introduction. It says, for Niger Congo, all we can say is that there has so far been no principled justification for this as a language family. As Dimmendahl states in section 3, by the criteria of regular sound correspondences among these languages and of the reconstruction of protoforms, Niger Congo is not a proven genetic unity. It may well be that, as Hein and Kuteva say, Greensburg's genetic classification of African languages is by now widely accepted, but being widely accepted, therefore among Africanists, does not equate with has been scientifically justified.
Okay.
And this is what people don't get. And so you even make this section here. It says, at the end of section 1, we quoted Dench's methodological principle that only after all possible explanations for the shared features have been exhausted should they be taken to be a genetic inheritance. The opposite procedure appears to have been followed by Africanists. At a first stage, every sort of resemblance was taken as indicative of a genetic connection. Many of these are in fact typological or areal similarities. So when you start getting into these books that get into the nitty-gritty of the comparisons and they start critiquing each other, then you get this information.
Got it.
Right? So like it's yeah. So this is why we have these discussions, and why, you know, people don't want to, well, they actually try to avoid these discussions with me because I have these sources and more. And so like this is something like Jean-Léonce Deneux, he writes in his book on the history of African linguistics. When we reread the most striking works of the great Africanists from the beginning of the 20th century, we are struck by a really massive fact. It's that they almost never explain their theoretical support. They probably do apply linguistics in the sense that we hear this word today, but they are no more theorists and fundamentalists than one would find at the origin of a new scientific hypothesis. Like this is discussed ad infinitum when it comes to these Africanists, and people think that I'm just, you know, on the fringe when it comes to this information, and that's far from the case. So this is why we have to arm ourselves and be in deep study and know what is the actual consensus. And people using that word all willy-nilly don't know what it means.
Right, because until you do the verified research, many people still in this the Kemet community still, I sometimes hear the word Afro-Asiatic thrown around. And so we're doing ourselves a major disservice by throwing around a term, as you said, that is widely accepted but hasn't been scientifically justified. So I mean, I just wanted to ask that because there's a lot of confusion around that term. So
Indeed.
Yeah.
But I do appreciate, you know, everyone for joining. I'm just realizing the time, we're almost getting to 4 hours.
Thank you.
You know, and that's usually long for my taste. But you know, it's an open forum, and I haven't been doing that many shows lately. But again, on tomorrow at 9 p.m. Eastern time here in the United States, we're going to be interviewing Brother Jabadi Powell, a powerful elder out of Houston, Texas, one of the co-founders of the Taseti African Historical Society. And we're going to be talking about that and the practicality of knowledge, and his relationship and the importance of the late Dr. Ben. So we'll be talking about all that on tomorrow, on Thursday, the 28th. And then on Saturday morning, 11 a.m. Eastern time here in the United States, we'll be interviewing our good brother Kapuya Chiuma, or Chiuma, out of he's originally from the Democratic Republic of Congo. He's of the Baluba people, but he currently resides in Israel. So it'll be 6 p.m. Israel time there. And so we're going to be talking about the Congo School of Egyptology and Egyptian as a Bantu language and culture. And he's a student of the great Mubabinge Bilolo. And we're going to examine some of his comparisons and arguments. I'm going to give him some feedback live on the show, on Saturday morning. So y'all make sure that y'all tune in for that. And again, I want to thank each and every one of y'all for joining the conversation and joining the chat. And of course, each and every one of you who came on the panel earlier. I'm about to try to get some work done. I got an interview. I'm being interviewed tomorrow for someone's show. It's going to be a pre-recorded show. So got to prepare for that. And then, later on in that evening, my interview. So I do appreciate each and every one of you. Make sure that if you have not gotten the book yet, Race and Identity in Ancient Egypt, Volume 1, you can get it from my website at asarimhotep.com, or you can go to Amazon. And, if you haven't gotten a copy of Muntu Wan Zambi from Dr. Chilema Lema Mukinge, I very much encourage you to do that as well. And so we can build a library. You can expand your knowledge about African people, languages, customs, and the like. And so is there anything that you want to share before we go?
No, nothing can start. I just want to say thank you very much for taking the time out to do this stream, answering the questions of all the panelists, including myself. Good luck for the interview tomorrow. And thank you very much for the work you're doing, brother. The ancestors are proud and they will continue to help. So thank you very much.
I appreciate it. Again, thank you for joining. Well, until next time, people, I hope you all have a blessed night, and you will see me back here on tomorrow. So y'all be easy, and good night. Peace.
This program was created with the love and support of all of our Patreon members and subscribers. If you are not a member yet and would like to see more content like this, consider becoming a member today. The link is in the description of this video. Your support is greatly appreciated.
Yeah. Tokyo wanna those that. What's up? Feeling like I dropped the draw for and caught Uno. Came to kick the door with a game man judo. Pin game low, that's why they give me kudos. Inspired by the 3-0. 595, check it for pack light. Hit the turnpike, slide to a baseline. Gotta sound like I just hit the 8-5. Oh, I'm so ready. By enemies necessary, we gon' be legendary. Hold up. About to grow the payrolls. If you see the vision and you're with it, you should say so. Cause we about building, elevating the millions.